Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV episode. Today is Thursday, July 7th. Wow, a week of July in the books already. And I'm Alan Schimmel bringing you our TechstrongTV show for today. We've got some great content for you today, some interviews, some recent, actually they're all recent, but some from RSA, some from KubeCon, some here from the TechStrong studios, as well as some great sessions from a previous virtual event as well. We're going to kick things off today with an interview with my friend Tim Hendricks. Tim is the co-founder CTO over at Styra. They're the people behind OPA, Open Policy Agent. And they just announced a pretty cool native integration, direct integration with HashiCorp Terraform Cloud, the official name. And, for those of you using Terraform, it adds some really nice functionality with the Styra DAS integration. And of course, Styra DAS is the enterprise product from Styra. So anyway, good interview there with Tim. It's good to have him back. Next up, we did another interview here in studio with Jonas Bershawed. He's the CEO and founder of StackShare, and this is a really great story. He's been at this now, I think since something like 2013, 7 or 8 years, building something called StackShare, which is a community for developers where you can go and see what other people are using for their stack and to solve certain problems. The community is now 100 million strong. They have an enterprise version, very similar to the model that GitHub Enterprise promotes with GitHub. So we spoke to Jonas about that and about, what's the attraction that over 1 million developers have signed on to this. So excellent interview there, and do check out StackShare. Next up after that, we're going to go back to Valencia, which by the way was an amazing location for this year's KubeCon, Cloud Native Con in Europe. And it's a conversation I had with Nick Van Wiggeren. He's VP of Engineering at PlanetScale. PlanetScale is a serverless MySQL database. Got a lot of support out there in the Cloud Native community, and I think Nick will tell you why. It's a great conversation. Then we're going to go do something old for today. We're going to go back to AppSecCon and securing the software supply chain, relevant topic for today. And in this one, we have Cassie Crosslett from Schneider Electric and Caleb Queern from KPMG Cybersecurity Services, as well as the one and only Alan Friedman from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. And they're going to talk about software supply chain. If Alan's talking, we're talking S-bombs and everything else. This was a great session, actually. And if you're interested in S-bombs and software supply chains, do check it out. Then we have a few interviews from Charlene O'Hanlon. Char is going to interview Ricardo Villadiego, founder and CEO of Lumu Technologies, where they're going to talk about some new research that Lumu recently did that shows ransomware is usually preceded by other malware first. So it's almost like precursor malware. So if you could, these are telltale signs that someone may be targeting you for ransomware, so shut it down. Next up, we have another interview with Charlene with Brian Woodworth, or Woody Woodworth. And Brian is with Aviatrix, and Charlene and he discuss how embedding security into the multi-cloud data plane can help reduce the company, or the complexity, of securing your network infrastructure. Finally, we have another Charlene interview today, and that one is with Patrick Allen, VP of Artificial Intelligence at Unifone, and we're going to talk a little bit about AI, which is certainly one of the most overused, misunderstood terms out here in tech today. But good conversation with Patrick and Charlene. After that, we have two great interviews with Mitchell Ashley in the analyst corner. Mitch is going to first interview Fleming Shy, and he's the CTO of Barracuda. I think it's still Barracuda Network, so we all call him Barracuda. Actually, Mitchell did this interview over at RSA just last month, and some good stuff there. And then Mitchell interviews a friend of mine, my friend Hugh Nejamanzi. Hugh is, of course, the president of Anomaly, and this is also from Mitch's private stock of RSA conference interviews from this past June. Finally, we'll end things up with The View with Vizard. Mike Vizard has Darren Williams, the BlackFog CEO, and he's going to talk, unfortunately, about how the pace of ransomware attacks are being launched continues to escalate. We were hoping it was a fad, but evidently it's getting bigger than ever. Good interview with Mike. I also forgot to mention we will, of course, have a news roundup today, and we have our new news reporter, Natan Solomon, an intern here at TechStrong, doing his first newscast today. So good luck to Natan with that. We'll see how it is. You guys can watch it and let us know. Anyway, that's it for TechstrongTV today. Stay tuned. It's a great show. We'll be back in a minute.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
Hi, I'm Natan Solomon. Today is Thursday, July 7th, and here's the headlines. First, Tennessee's unemployment benefits website was taken down due to a cyber attack on its vendor, Geographic Solutions. With over 12,000 people relying on the unemployment benefits program to survive, the attack prevented the Department of Labor and Workforce Development from processing new claims, sending benefit payments, or providing job placement services. After being down for several days, the website is back up and running, with benefits being allocated to those who couldn't make claims during the downtime. Next, Sky High Security announced its partnership with Gotara, a global career growth platform for women in STEM. Through the partnership, Gotara's STAR program advisors will upskill and mentor Sky High Security employees, offering them personalized and confidential career advice. The collaboration is a key component of Sky High's leadership development program, which looks to address a skill shortage in the cybersecurity field. By diversifying its workforce, Sky High and Gotara are empowering women to take on managerial and leadership roles within the company. In other news, the U.S. government has pushed new funding into 3 technology companies to evade censorship of Ukrainian news. Since the start of the conflict, Russia has banned numerous independent media sources like Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The financing efforts focus on firms that build VPNs that can bypass geographic restrictions and evade government censorship technology. The funding flows through the U.S. Agency for Global Media, a federal agency that oversees U.S. government-backed broadcasters. Next, the Large Hadron Collider on the Franco-Swiss border near Geneva, Switzerland, was successfully started for the 3rd time. Over the next 4 years, the collider will run at a record energy of 13.6 trillion electron volts, granting increased precision and discovery potential. With the collider up and running, scientists hope to gain a better understanding of dark matter, a mysterious substance that makes up over 30% of the matter-energy composition of the universe. The increased efficiency of the collider may also present answers to some fundamental questions about dark matter, potentially even telling us about its origin. Next, ABI research predicts that 75% of 5G networks will be upgraded to 5G Advanced by 2030. The first release of the 5G Advanced standard happened in December 2021, and it is now recognized as the next major evolution of 5G. Networks that upgrade will benefit from enhanced mobility and reliability for advanced applications. However, the upgrade of 5G network infrastructures is predicted to be faster in the consumer market than with enterprises, with 50% of 5G base stations predicted to upgrade to advanced in the enterprise market. Within the consumer market, 5G Advanced offers monetary opportunities with cases like gaming and video streaming, while enterprises will benefit from improved remote working and virtual training. On Security Boulevard, we have an article talking about AMD being the latest victim of the Ransom House Extortion Group, a cybercriminal gang which claims to have exfiltrated more than 450 gigabytes of data. Amid the global chip shortage, AMD was attacked by Ransom House, with details being released to the public by the cybercriminals. For one, it was shockingly revealed that AMD staff used password as the password for critical network access. AMD joins 5 other companies that have been breached by Ransom House, including the ShopRite Group, one of South Africa's largest supermarket chains. Next, on DevOps.com, we have an article talking about how more than half of DevOps pros have backdoor access to IT infrastructure. In the discussed survey, 53% of respondents admitted to sharing credentials across teams, while well over half of respondents said it could take days or even weeks for access requests to be approved. With an increasing amount of workers operating remotely, it's important for infrastructure access to be speedy. However, a whopping 73% of respondents said it takes at least 15 minutes to gain access to infrastructure. With these lengthy wait times, it's evident just how much time and effort DevOps and cybersecurity professionals are wasting waiting for approval from one another. Finally, an article on Container Journal covers 7 cloud-native computing foundation projects for building cloud-native networks. Using these tools, engineers can construct CNI compatible networks and overlay networks on top of pre-existing cloud-native architectures. Such networks can produce increased connectivity in a distributed architecture, which will continue to be a goal for many enterprises going forward. And that's today's headlines.
Welcome to this TechstrongTV interview. I'm really happy to be joined by Tim Henrichs. Tim is with Styra. He's the co-founder and CTO, I believe, right, Tim?
Right. Yeah, it's good to be here, Alan. Thanks for having me again.
Good to have you back on. You know, I saw Bill out at RSA. I didn't see you. I was hoping to run into some of the folks, but maybe it's better we didn't. There was a lot of people getting COVID. The less people I saw, the better I guess I was in retrospect. But anyway, it's good to have you on here virtually where we're both safe and all's good.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely have to sync up one of these future conferences.
Absolutely. So, Tim, look, we've been covering Styra since, I think, almost since you guys launched, basically. You know, we've covered OPA, and I think our audience is well, you never know, Tim. Let's assume some people don't know who Styra is and OPA and everything. Why don't you give them a little background?
Yep, great. Good idea. So Styra is a company that helps enterprises by providing them with a unified solution to authorization. Right now, authorization is one of those terms that sometimes people get confused about because there's a very similar one, authentication. So I always like to remind people what actually is authorization. And authorization is just that problem of making sure that you have controls in place over the actions that either people or machine take on software, right? So I always like examples of, banking apps. If I log into my bank account online, can I withdraw money or transfer money from one account to another? That's an authorization problem. And then the other one that I think is probably more relevant for today is sort of the actions that developers are taking while they're building and upgrading and running those applications. So every time they're trying to upgrade an app or spin up a new server or change the network configuration or attach storage, those are actions too. And companies want authorization controls over how developers are changing that infrastructure. So that's kind of what we do at Styra, is provide a unified solution to both those application level authorization problems and what we sometimes call the infrastructure authorization problems.
Absolutely. I think that, it's probably a good, concise definition of what you guys do there. I haven't quite heard it that tight. Good. So, Tim, you guys recently announced some news, though, because, well, let's go with the news and then we'll go into it from there. Go ahead, Tim.
Right. Yeah. So the news that we wanted to share was just basically a native integration between HashiCorp's Terraform Cloud and Styra's product, the Declarative Authorization Service. And so the idea there is just now, because we have that native integration, we've got both of those products working in tandem. On the Terraform Cloud side, what that means is that developers who are using Terraform to spin up and manage new resources on let's say the public cloud, can then couple that with Styra's policies that allow that organization to put authorization controls over the kinds of resources that get spun up and how those resources get configured. So, that those same examples that we just talked through are good ones, making sure that, maybe the policies that people write say that all the servers that get spun up in production have to use these trusted binaries, or making sure that all the storage that's being used in production accounts and production applications have to be encrypted at rest, or something similar in the networking space. So that's kind of the idea. Take Terraform Cloud, which lets developers spin up new resources in public cloud, and take Styra DAV, which allows the organization as a whole to put guardrails on how those resources are configured. Overall, developers spin up resources very quickly, but safely and securely at the same time.
And really, to me, we've got two things kind of bringing together here. First of all is the issue of allowing developers to configure in the course of their development for these applications sort of access controls, right? Based on policies, which, look, we talk about shifting left. The earlier we get it in, the easier it is, right? As things, progressively turn to more and more chaos as they go right. But secondly, when we talk about cloud security, Tim, really, the cloud has changed the security, right? We're no longer in this molten castle with that big firewall and the router in front of it and the IPS and the UTMs and all of these things. And really, the big thing about cloud security is identity and access control, right? Who you are, and based upon that, where can you go and what can you do? What do you have access to? What do you not have access to? What can you set? What could you not set? And it's these. I don't want to use the term cloud gateways because it's not, but it's the IAM aspect of security that really is kind of the killer cloud security app. Now, all too often we think of IAM as, okay, two-factor authentication. Let's make sure Tim is really Tim. And we don't spend enough time thinking about, okay, we know it's Tim, and Tim's a good guy, but we still don't trust him, right? We've got to make sure this is where Tim's allowed to play. These are the buttons Tim's allowed to press, right? There are some things Tim can't change. And these sort of policies, and quite frankly, whether we're talking about Tim or a non-human, right, a non-person kind of identity, those access controls are, vital, right? It's the big thing there.
Yeah, you hit on at least two great points there, right? I think the second one is right on the money, right? Like, I think that what we see is that as an industry, we're just creating more and more complicated software, right? It's like, if you think about the public cloud as an example, or Salesforce, or any of these SaaS software solutions that we use frequently, they're just incredibly complex. And so, like, just doing authentication, just convincing the machine that I am Tim isn't enough anymore. There are just too many buttons to to use your analogy. Too many buttons, and I shouldn't be able to push them all. And that's because the space of sort of buttons that exist is just so big in today's modern SaaS software. So I totally agree there that and therefore the only way to sort of make sure that you've got reasonable controls in place over what buttons people can push is authorization, to your point. And I agree. The more complex these pieces of software get, the more important authorization becomes. And so you're right. Like, zero trust is a great, concept here, in the sense that every piece of software should always support authentication authorization, because if you do that very well and you've got finite enough grained controls on those authorization policies that people can set, you've gotten a long way toward actually securing your software in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And let's spend a moment talking about Terraform, though, too. It's look, when I first started DevOps.com eight plus years ago, it was Chef, it was Ansible, it was Puppet, and that's how people were spinning up instances in the cloud and elsewhere. Puppet was recently purchased by, I'm drawing a blank this very second, Chef is Progress Software. Ansible's part of Red Hat, obviously. But really, Terraform has kind of taken Terraform's kind of what the cool kids are using a little bit, right? In terms of setting up their cloud environments.
Yeah. And I think what's really powerful about Terraform in many ways is something that's near and dear to my heart, which is that, the way I look at it is that it lets developers declaratively spec out exactly what resources they want on the public cloud. And so Terraform defines that nice file format for saying, here are the servers I want, here are the storage systems I want to connect, here are the, networks that I want to set up. And then Terraform's job is to be able to take that spec and render it into the public cloud, for example. Mm-hmm. And that's incredibly powerful, because now you have this file format that's entirely declarative. So now you can do things like apply policy checks to it to make sure that, the servers in there are configured correctly, or the networks or the storage are all configured correctly. It's also a file format that allows you to do things like check it into Git. Or any other source control. And that allows you to very easily do kind of a rollback as well. So if some developer says, hey, we're running in production, I need to make a change, everything looks right, but at the end of the day, there's something wrong. And they only find that out once they actually roll that change out to production, then they can very easily roll back because they've got it version controlled. And so that's, I think, some of the power and the allure of Terraform, is that it is that declarative specification for public cloud resources that people can look at, that machines can look at and analyze, and that, obviously for us, that you can apply policy to put a bunch of checks and guardrails in place to make sure that it's all configured the way it should be.
Absolutely. Tim, you mentioned a native integration. Look, in a world of APIs that we live in, is it not an API integration then? Is it truly native?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Just about every integration is an API-based integration. Okay. But I think what you'll see is that, like, if you log into Styra DAS, there is a section where you would go and configure, Terraform Cloud. So in that sense, it's not it's a deeper integration than simply setting up some webhooks that would call each other's APIs. So that's
so. And I haven't seen this, so I need you to kind of explain to our audience here. So you actually spin up and configure Terraform from within Styra DAS, or the other way around?
No. It is a synergistic relationship between the two products, right? So a customer will go into Terraform Cloud and use that, and have all their teams use that to go ahead and run Terraform plans, right? So they'll manage their Terraform files there. They'll go ahead and execute those plans to create and render those resources on the public cloud. But then what they'll also do is they'll configure that integration between Terraform Cloud and Styra DAS, so that every time a developer tries to push a change to Terraform Cloud will call into Styra DAS and ask, hey, is this plan safe to execute, before going ahead to execute it? And so that's really the relationship there. So we do the thing that we do best in the world, which is evaluate policy over rich and complicated configuration files like Terraform plans, and then Terraform Cloud does what it does best, which is manage those Terraform files and execute those plans.
I guess I got to ask, as long as we're down this road, is there an additional charge for this integration? Are all Styra DAS customers able to use it? How's that being done?
Yep. So yeah, we just license based on basically the number of real world systems that you're managing policy for with Styra DAS. And so this is just if you happen to be managing Terraform Cloud policies through us, and that's just one more of those. So you're just licensed based on the number of integrations effectively that you're using. Cool.
And just to be clear, this is public now, available?
Yep, it's available now. Go ahead and everybody should check it out. There's I should say that there is a DAS free version of DAS, so everybody can sign up themselves and check out Terraform, or we've got obviously integrations for Kubernetes and Envoy and plenty of service meshes and gateways. So yeah, we definitely recommend you can check it out yourself.
Where did they go, Tim?
I'll go to
Styra.com. I can be the shill in the audience. Go ahead, say it again.
Styra.com.
STYRA.com, right?
You got it.
All right, man. Hey, beyond the Terraform news, which is great, by the way, anything else exciting you want to tell our audience about?
Well, sure. Yeah, actually, if you go ahead and sign up for a free account, we actually just added some recent functionality that makes it especially easy to go ahead and kind of play around and explore the product. Like in the past, we used to have like these tutorials where it's like you as a user would bring a mini kube, and then we would give you sample data and sample apps to go ahead and run them and see how DAS would help you manage policies for those different kinds of apps and infrastructure. But now recently, at least you can go on and we sort of run all that for you. So we kind of give you sample data built in, and so now you can give it a whirl without ever having to leave the product. So that's pretty exciting, and we think it's pretty easy to use.
Very cool, man. Very cool, Tim. Hey, I want to thank you for checking in here with us. Keep us posted of new Styra news and OPA, and best of luck to you guys.
All right. Thank you, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
Always, man. Tim Henrichs, CTO, co-founder, Styra, here on TechstrongTV. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another TechstrongTV interview. I've got a new company to introduce you, or a new company for our audience to introduce you to today. We're going to do it through Jonas Brashared. If I got that wrong, I apologize. Hey, Jonas, welcome to TechstrongTV.
Thanks so much, Alan. Excited to be here, and you got it right.
We're excited. Oh, good. Well, I try. Anyway, Jonas, let's hear it, maybe a little bit about you, and then let's dive into your company.
Sure. Yeah, well, first, I'm a huge fan. I've seen your interviews, and I've also been, following DevOps.com for quite some time. So been in this space for a while and know what you all do. So excited to be here. The company's called StackShare. I can start with a little bit of background about myself, just super brief to not bore the audience here, but I started my career right out of undergrad at Accenture, and I did IT strategy very briefly. So Gartner was kind of the way that companies would choose technologies at that scale. These were Fortune 500s that wanted to do things like build data centers. So I did that for a very brief period. And then I made my way out to Silicon Valley and I joined a startup that had just gone through Y Combinator. They were essentially building a Square competitor. And I got to see sort of like super early stage company building. And I would actually see the founders of the company sort of going back and forth with other founders in their Y Combinator batch saying, hey, we have free credits with Heroku, Azure, AWS. What should we choose? And, they would have these conversations over email. So that's kind of what sparked the idea for StackShare originally back in 2014. I just thought, there should be a website that actually helps you choose technologies. And that was kind of the key insight was, I was also learning how to code on the side. And I thought it was kind of ridiculous that, there's websites to help you figure out how to program, right? There's Stack Overflow for when you have issues of coding. But before you get to that step, there's like no guide out there, right? There's no community around this. And that's what really inspired me to create StackShare was, there should be a place where you can go to discuss technology components and what other people are using, right? So that was sort of the original driver for the idea. And, it's evolved now to become a platform. But yeah, that's kind of the really short version of it.
Excellent, man. And so when did you actually start StackShare?
Yeah, so I started StackShare in 2014 as really just a community, and we launched on Hacker News. Yeah, it was interesting because we didn't really have much of a website at the time. It was just the initial idea, but the initial idea just resonated so much with developers that that was enough to get things started. And the next year we went through 500 startups and got our first round of fundraising or our first round of venture capital. So, it was really a developer driven sort of idea. And that's been the guiding principle is like, let's ultimately make something that developers love. And if we just sort of keep that at the core of, what we do, then good things will happen.
That's excellent. What a great story, man. We should mention, you should mention it. You'll say, what's the URL?
Stackshare.io.
Excellent. And now, look, 2014, it's when I launched DevOps.com, right? And, it's not 2014 anymore. It's 2022. And, the world's changed a bit. Certainly COVID has wrought a lot of changes. In your mind, what do you see as the big changes that have affected the community and affected StackShare itself?
Yeah, so from a company perspective, we crossed 1 million developers that were part of the community now last year. So that was sort of the big milestone. And what we learned over the past couple years, really over COVID, was that the community came to us and said, hey, StackShare is awesome. Seeing what other developers are doing is great. Comparing technology is awesome. I can see what Uber is using. I can see what all these companies are doing. Great. But I just want to understand what's going on inside my own company. So these were folks that are working at massive companies, and they said, can you give us a way to do this stuff privately? Because now the problem that companies face, particularly at scale, is that they just have a lot of tech sprawl, right? And that's the big problem that sort of surfaced as we started to build this community was that most companies today have thousands and thousands of code bases, right? NPM had a stat that they put out that the average modern web application is using over 2,000 modules, right? And so now you just have all this sprawl across thousands of code bases. And so that's the problem that the community came to us with. And actually why we're here today is because our community product has really evolved. And now we've created an enterprise offering that essentially allows companies to get real-time visibility into all the tech stacks that they're using internally, right? And so you plug in your VCS, and then we map out all the technologies you're using, even down to the version level. And we keep it up to date for you in real time. And what we learned was that most companies do this through spreadsheets right now, Literally, there's a Fortune 500 company as part of the community that said, hey, we have spreadsheets where we list out all the different DevOps stacks that are being used across engineering teams. And so, traditionally this has been manual, and we said, look, we can actually make that much better because we've already built all this data, the profiles, we have the community around all this. So we can just use that to actually help you get visibility into all this tech sprawl that you have. And sort of that's what we've seen has happened. And I think in the startup world, we kind of take it for granted that we have standard tooling for how to deploy and build front-end apps. A lot of modern companies do, companies that are cloud native. But what we don't realize is that the vast majority of Fortune 500s have not even standardized on a VCS. We very rarely talk to a company that is all on GitHub or all on GitLab or Bitbucket. Everyone's sort of using 3 or 4 of these different solutions. So I think the problem that we've seen really rear its head has become even more pronounced over the past couple of years, with teams being more distributed, developers making more decisions on their own, and just not coordinating across teams. So that's the problem that we're now here to solve. And I think what's really interesting is that we haven't seen too many companies try to solve this. And it's an exciting space to be in because on the community side, it's all about what's the world using, right? What tech stacks are being used by the world, what technologies, what new ones, which ones are trending. But then on the enterprise side, it's like, no, it's all about what is my own company using, right? And giving you insights into that. And so both sides really play into the bigger sort of mission that we have, which has remained the same. And our mission is really to make developers more productive by helping them learn about technologies through the people and companies they trust, right? And so, yeah.
Interesting stuff. So, I mean, look, this is a big kind of step for you guys where, I mean, before, it sounded like it was almost like the Stack Overflow model, where it's really the community of developers sharing notes, if you will, right? On what they're doing, how they're doing it, how this one does this, how that one does that. And that is, that's like the very definition of developer community, right? I think developers love being in those peer-to-peer situations, not necessarily a vendor telling them how to use something or how to use their tool. So, to be fair, vendors sometimes get a bad name, right, because they try to sell too much. But who knows their use cases better than the vendor does anyway? But anyway, but you're moving from that community now to call it a private label version of StackFlow, right? Where one organization can StackShare, right?
Yeah.
I said StackFlow. I apologize.
No worries.
StackShare, where one enterprise can use it just for their own stuff. It reminds me kind of when GitHub came out with GitHub Enterprise, for instance, right? Where you can use a private GitHub, and what you're putting up there is not available to the public, and
all of that good stuff. Is it a hosted version? Model. It is. Okay.
Yep. So it's the exact same model. Mm-hmm.
The StackShare Enterprise is a hosted version?
Yep. It's all still hosted on stackshare.io. But that's how we explain it to developers too. It's very similar to GitHub. Public is free, private you pay for. And Stack Overflow has a very similar model as well, funny enough, where they've got the public community, but then if you want sort of the team version where you can privately have conversations about specific lines of code, they have an offering that allows you to do that. So very similar model. And it's pretty easy to understand in the developer community. But I think it took us a while to actually figure out that that's what we should be building. But the good news is that we finally got there, and we actually a few weeks ago just announced that over 1,000 companies are now using StackShare Enterprise, from startups like LaunchDarkly and Axel Hire, all the way to public companies like Tyler Technologies. So that was kind of the significant milestone that we just announced.
Significant.
Yeah,
be proud
absolutely.
of that. That's great, man. Good stuff.
So, So I guess my question is, do you consider yourself complementary to like GitHub and even Stack Overflow, or competitive, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, well, on the GitHub side, it's complementary. Like, actually, one of the case studies we just did was about how Tyler Technologies is moving over to GitHub, and they're using StackShare as the carrot, and saying, "Hey, look, if you put your repos inside of GitHub internally, then you get access to StackShare." So it's very complementary. The VCS is a core component of our solution. So GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, and Azure DevOps, we support all of them, and it's very complementary because that's the data source for us to give you all these insights. On the Stack Overflow side, most of the times when a company tells us that they're using Stack Overflow for teams, they're using StackShare along with it, because Stack Overflow is great for code level discussions, right? Specific methods, functions, ways that you want to implement an actual logic. We sit a layer above that to say, hey, if you want to know whether you should use React or AngularJS, we'll just show you what every other developer inside your company is using for the different applications you have deployed, right? So it's very complementary, and we solve a different problem. So companies are usually using us together.
Excellent. I didn't realize that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we'll eventually have an integration. So
what's next?
Well, next is just building a ton of enterprise features. We've got a pretty massive backlog, but the bigger vision here is to get to the point where it's what we're calling tech stack intelligence, right? That's sort of the name we've given the platform. You could think of it in terms of BI, but if BI was sort of like in the engineering world, right? One system of record that knows about all the different technologies you're using inside the company on the engineering side of the house. And so the bigger vision is to really be this system of record for engineering teams, right? The one place that developers can go to understand what's being used inside and outside of their company, right? So
what a great idea.
Yeah, so we're just building more enterprise features, and we've got a bunch of things on the roadmap that large companies are asking for that we're excited to build.
That is excellent, man. I love this, Jonas. Good stuff. You added, as you mentioned, since 2014. We're all, I'm an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. During those, what would you, there had to be times where you questioned your sanity and your, what am I doing? What for people out here, because everyone thinks that, oh, you did a startup and overnight you're a big success. A lot of startups, there are some who, within a year or two are very successful, but I think more are more like yourself, right? They toil away in relative obscurity, building their startup one brick at a time, if you will, until it's something, to be proud of. What advice would you give people out there who, want to do something?
Yeah, I always tell other founders and folks that come to me for advice that the most critical component is that you're passionate about the problem space. I think a lot of times we focus a little too much on the solution, but we don't think enough about how the problem, what we want to do about this problem space. And so for me, it's always been being really interested in this idea of like helping people choose technologies is just interesting because no one has really solved it. It's 2022, decisions are still a mess when it comes to technology. So for me, it's been about, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, because you can pivot the solution. But if you stick with the problem space, you'll just learn more and more over time, and you'll get better at the solution piece of it. So that's kind of the big advice I would give folks. Make sure you're passionate about the problem. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Hey, Jonas, I appreciate you coming on today, too, and telling us all about the company. Can you give me the URL one more time?
Yep, absolutely. Stackshare.io.
Excellent. Just want to make sure people get it. Stackshare.io. Jonas, thanks for coming on, man. And keeping enlightening us on what's going on here. I'm sure many people in our audience are already familiar. Come back on, keep us posted on what's happening, okay?
Absolutely, will do. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Jonas Prashad, CEO, founder of StackShare at stackshare.io. I got all of it right. Hey, man, we're going to take a break here on TechstrongTV. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, we're live back here in Valencia, Spain for Cloud Native Con, KubeCon. We're out on the show floor itself, right here, and I think it's Expo Hall 1. There are two major expo halls. Lots of traffic. There are keynotes going on right now, though, and I don't know Nick. Well, let me first introduce you to Nick, then we can talk. Nick Van Wiggeren. Nick is with PlanetScale, right?
That I am.
So, Nick, I mean, were you expecting this many people?
I have to say I wasn't. I thought the line to get in here looked like it was about an hour long today. It wrapped around the block. It was pretty impressive.
I came in early. Actually, I got in yesterday and set up.
Smart.
And got in early today. But yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because, back home in the States, we're seeing some really kind of uneven.
Yep.
Some shows are tracking a lot, others aren't.
Yeah.
So it's good. I mean, there's a good turnout here.
It's nice.
It is nice to see. You forget what these are about. But anyway, Nick, let's talk PlanetScale. So our audience, maybe some of them know PlanetScale, some don't.
Yep. Yeah, so we're a serverless database platform. So what we are is a MySQL compatible database that starts small and kind of scales to near infinity. Marketing team wants me to say infinity, I'll say near infinity, so the engineers on the call
beyond.
Could be beyond, you never know.
Right.
But yeah, so it looks like MySQL to your application, but you don't have to worry about provisioning capacity,
that's great.
CPUs, memory. You just query the database, get your data, and we handle the rest.
So you have all the advantages of a MySQL database in a serverless environment.
Exactly, you plug your ORM if you're using Prisma or something like that in. Easy to migrate.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. We should just get the website out of the way too.
Yeah.
Nick, planetscale.com?
Planetscale.com, yeah, come check us out. We have a really great free tier if you want to kind of get into it and just figure out what it's all about. People love it. We actually have people running their companies on the free tier.
Really?
So yeah, we're
a lot of these free
it.
tier ones, they're really great as long as they don't have more than 2 people or,
No, we don't do per seat pricing. We don't do, you want to invite the third person, well, that's $10,000. We want to hook people on the good database and then get them to want to buy up for the features they can get after that.
Excellent, man. I love it. So, I mean, obviously, KubeCon is the place, Cloud Native Con is the place to be with this kind of thing, but you guys have some news actually not being announced.
Yes.
At Cloud Native
Correct.
Con. But, yeah, look, it's just between you and a couple of thousand people. Can you tell us anything?
I can't tell you much. I can tell you we're doing a launch week 2 next week. So we did our first launch week late last year. That's when we went to GA. And then a couple months ago in March, we launched PlanetScale Rewind, which is our schema migration undo feature.
Love that.
Never seen before in the database world. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But next week then, we've got a whole other slate of features and a lot of other stuff that we're going to be announcing. So just ways to make the database better. We got product launches almost every day next week. So I'd tune in on PlanetScale Data on Twitter. It's going to be a fun week.
Very good, man.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting. Good luck with it. So let's talk about replicating database schema.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah. So
tell me, Rewind, is that what you called it?
That's what it is. Yeah. Okay. So I come from a kind of infrastructure background. I've worked at companies like GitHub, DigitalOcean, kind of real giving developers what they want, really deep infrastructure, and figuring out how databases don't exactly always work well on that, right? The DevOps world, the application world is really gone far, and the database world hasn't necessarily kept up. Still using a lot of the same technology, still fielding a lot of the same problems, right? Yep. You've got this beautiful, K8 stack, and then people are like, well, we don't run the database on it, well, we can't do that. So what we want to do is we want to bring all the kind of fancy, fun stuff that application developers have to the database. So one of the first things we did was what we call Rewind, which is a schema migration undo feature. Just like you can roll a bad deploy back, you go out, you say there's a bug, click the button, maybe your canary catches it automatically. We want to do the same thing for databases. Instead of having to restore from a backup if you do a bad schema migration or take a bunch of downtime.
And we know how long that could take.
I mean, we've all been a part of this, right? You drop a column you shouldn't have, and then you're 3 hours into pulling a backup down from S3, and
it's a pain in the ass.
You got 10 people in the incident room, all
yelling
staring
and
at the same progress bar.
I hear you.
Yeah. So instead what we did is every schema migration that goes through PlanetScale, and we have this great kind of collaborative online schema migration workflow. If something goes wrong, we give you a rewind button or an undo button. And for 30 minutes after the deploy, you click that button and we'll revert your database and your data back to what the old schema looked like. So you won't have to lose any writes that you did during that 30-minute period. We'll just make the database look like it did before with all your data added in afterward, and pretty much instantly.
Very cool, man.
So, yeah.
Excellent. So look, I've been in technology a long time. The database, for as important as it is, there's always a little bit of like the forgotten kid.
100%.
And it's always like the last one to get the cool features.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's great that you guys are doing this, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But you say to yourself, why was the database the last one to get this?
I think, when you look at it, it's the part of the stack that's maybe the most important from a pure operational perspective. You can play around with a lot of other stuff, but the trust that you have to have in the database, it's got to be rock solid, it's got to be dependable, and that then inherently means that there's fewer changes and the velocity is slower. And that's probably a good thing for some reasons, right? You can experiment with a new front-end framework and ditch it. You can experiment with a new application deployment platform and go, we'll deploy the code somewhere else. But database migrations take weeks, months, years to do. And so I think people have been pretty hesitant in the past to really march forward and try to innovate. So at PlanetScale, what we want to do is, we want to be able to have that trust, the performance, the dependability, the rock solid database kind of foundation, and then build features on top that actually help application teams do the stuff that they want to do. And I like to say we're outcome oriented, right? Yep. We want to help companies build the stuff they want to build. There's benchmarks, there's this, there's that, but at the end of the day, our success is when our customers go, well, thanks to PlanetScale, we can get done what we need to get done better and faster.
That's a great thing, man. So we've got, next week is our big week.
Next week's the big week. Yep.
Anything else happening CNCF-wise here?
Yeah, so we've got a couple talks. We got some engineers around. I think there's a Vitesse booth over on the other side of the pavilion as well.
Yes.
So we've got some folks from PlanetScale who are Vitesse core contributors and stuff like that who are there to answer questions about the open source project we're built on top of. And I mean, we just love the CNCF. We love everything they do. We're built on all these technologies, obviously Vitesse, but also, Kubernetes, Thanos,
you name it. Your own dog food, right?
100%.
I agree with you, man.
100%. It's our stack, it's our livelihood, and we're just really happy to be able to build on top of it all and deliver a product thanks to the hard work of everyone here, honestly.
Excellent. Hey, Nick, I want to thank you for stopping by.
My pleasure.
Good luck with the big releases next week.
Make sure you check it out. Don't miss it.
We will. We'll try to, I know we've been talking, we'll try to get some coverage on it.
Definitely.
On Container Journal and DevOps as well.
Awesome, we'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great rest of your
day. Nick Van Wiggeren at PlanetScale. We're live in Valencia. We're going to take a break for some sangria. We'll be right back.
Hi, and welcome back to AppSecCon 2022. In this next panel discussion, we're going to talk about securing the software supply chain with SBOMs. We've got three great speakers. We've got Cassie Crossley, VP and Deputy Product Security Officer with Product and System Security Office at Schneider Electric. We've got Caleb Quern, Director of at KPMG of Cybersecurity Systems. and Alan Friedman, Senior Advisor and Strategist at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a great session, some really insightful insights around SBOMs. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Hi, I'm Alan Friedman from CISA. I'm the guy who doesn't shut up about SBOM. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is diving into the idea of a software bill of materials and ultimately talking about how you can get involved with your organization. I'm joined by two longtime SBOM experts and really leaders in the community to help things move forward, Cassie Crossley and Caleb Quern. Cassie, you want to just tell folks how you got involved?
Sure. I'm from Schneider Electric, and I am a vice president in our product and system security office. So customer transparency, software bill of materials, really that software supply chain security is a passion for me. And that's why I've been involved in the topic for a couple of years now.
Fantastic. Caleb?
So I'm Caleb Quern. I'm a director with KPMG's cybersecurity consulting practice. And I guess I'm involved because, my job is making it easier for chief information security officers and CIOs to reduce risk as they build things across the software development lifecycle. And of course, a big component of that these days means being able to have faith in the things that the open source components that we bring in the door. So that's why I'm here and how I've been involved over the past few years.
Thank you. So super excited to have both of you here. But maybe before we dive in and start to pluck out some of your expertise, let's just make sure that we're all on the same page about what a software bill of materials is. So hopefully you've heard of it by now. One of the ideas that I like to say is, if you go to the store and you buy a Twinkie, it's going to come with a little list of ingredients that tells you what's in this. And for me, it's quite baffling that we have this level of transparency in a tasty, if not very biodegradable snack, but we don't have a similar level of transparency in the software that runs our critical infrastructure, that runs our government, and that runs our organizations. And that really is the idea to say, let me understand not how to make software, but what are the components that it's built on. Right. Modern software is assembled out of existing pieces. Caleb mentioned open source, and that's a big part of it. And a lot of the risks that we face aren't for a particular piece of software, but they're from automated or targeted attacks against some underlying component and some weakness in that. Now, SBOM can really affect you across the entire life cycle of software. It can help developers, right? You need to know what you ship. It can help people who are selecting software, buying software, to understand the potential risk of a new project on their network. And of course, once you're operating a system, you need to know, am I affected by a new risk? And the last thing I'll flag is a core part of this is automation. Right? If we're doing this manually, it won't work. In 2022, all security efforts really should be driven towards automation. And a big part of SBOM is building on two existing data formats, SPDX and CycloneDX, both out in the marketplace today. And both of them enable us to communicate basic SBOMs in a fairly standardized, uniform way. So with that said, I'm giving you sort of the basics, but all of that is sort of still very descriptive. Cassie and Caleb, I want to get into what's the current state of the marketplace today, right? Is everything I just said, is that aspirational, or can we do that? Let's start with Caleb.
Sure. Great to talk with you both. I'm so happy to be here. I think directly to answer your question, Alan, what is the current state? I think, wow, it's night and day from, say, today, from a year ago and 12 months ago when we started to talk about this. And I'm sure we all feel this when we're out talking to collaborators and stakeholders about this, that they may have heard of it before now. Right? Now when we have the conversation, they say, oh, I think I know what that is. Or maybe they even really know what it is. That's night and day. And that's a big improvement. I'll take that anytime. I still think we have a long way to go. I'm sure we'll get into that on the talk today as well. I think the vendor community, which is exciting because they're a major kind of piece of the solution, the broader vision that is going to be required to get this where we all want it to go together, they are all engaged for good reasons. And they're all ready to support with their nascent or existing SBOM capabilities. So that's, I think, a difference in the last 12 months. What about you, Cassie?
Well, I come from a development world, and understanding what you put into your software. If you go to any software group, any development team, they can say, oh yeah, the build manager knows what's in it, right? That's, we've got a list. We can figure out if you have any questions, but that doesn't give all the visibility that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I think that just as developers, we have and have known that it's really, wow, somebody needs to know what I've been doing and where this is all coming from. So that's going to be pretty interesting to talk for. But I think that we've got a good grounding. And as Caleb said, there's vendors. I could have 8 different ways to generate a SBOM right now. If you're part of your build pipeline, if it's part of your DevSecOps, if it's, or if it's part of a SCA tool, there's so many ways, that's great. And we're so much farther than we were. And I agree with Caleb on that.
So always fun to look behind us and see all the progress that we've made. What's still hard? Both of you have alluded to the idea that, hey, maybe this isn't a completely solved problem, a completely mature technology. What's hard, and what are some of the things that you think we as a community need to tackle? Let's start with Cassie.
I think from a larger standpoint, it has been very much a black box, as you mentioned earlier. That black box and how it went into it could have been many years, decades. I have code that's in paint.exe from the late 80s. So I know that there's a couple lines probably on your Windows system that I wrote. And how, how can you go back in time to make sure it is? So we're just at a high level, we understand SBOMs, looking at that, what's in my current component list. But when you think about how large some of these systems are, even just your cell phone, the number of lines and number of apps and number of potential SBOMs in a cell phone alone is pretty big. And so I think that the developers who built that over time, or even the ones that sit in those roles today, do not know the decisions are made, and maybe you're running code that should be deprecated, that should be removed, that isn't doing anything. And all of a sudden you're having to answer, why am I running this piece of code? Because someone's now asking you, why are you running? So I think that transparency is going to make a larger difference, where you might have had 10% of obsolete or unused code, and you're going to have to explain why, because it could be a potential risk. And they've not had those questions before. And that's part of the new world that we're going to be seeing.
I love that, which is to say, hey, even just planning for those questions is going to lead to a better internal process. Mm-hmm. Caleb, what's hard? What do we need to work on?
I think the recognition was like step 0. Where we are today, wonderful, big advancement, night and day, like we said. But what's hard is the rest. We're just beginning this journey that I think we all have relatively clear ideas on, but maybe not completely clear ideas on. Some of the things I know large organizations struggle with is just scanning everything and generating the SBOM. That's like getting that done is a big deal. And I don't want to minimize or underestimate the work involved in that simple operational task of generation of SBOMs. What I hope doesn't happen, maybe it's happening a little bit out there, is that we declare victory and move on once we've generated some SBOMs and we move on to the next shiny thing. Because now that we've got them, I think this is the real question: is what do we do? Like, what is the value to all of the different stakeholder groups across the organization with an SBOM? And that's a big conversation. But I think, what's hard about it is, some maybe at the operational level, there's that sense that, we've generated the SBOMs, or our source code management platform has done it for us. We're good to go, right? And I think that's just where, that you're enabled to make use of the value that is now revealed, now that you have the visibility. So I would say what's hard is enabling other teams like our threat intelligence teams, who could benefit from knowing the most important open source things that we use and consume in our environment. Get them engaged. Go ahead, Alan.
Can you give me sort of, hey, what's a short-term use case that you think we'll be able to achieve in the near term? And what's a more ambitious use case that you can imagine we could do if we have some really good innovation and maybe one of our listeners starts a new company?
Sure, I'll give it a shot, and I'd love to hear Cassie's thoughts. But so pulling on that thread, I began. Let's imagine that we have that, I'll just say simply like a pie chart, a distribution of all of the most important things that we have across our portfolio now that we rationalize all of our SBOMs together. Wow, with that insight, we can do things like inform the threat and tell people of what to keep an eye out for, and start crafting queries to light up our security operations center down the hall when something is awry, like a Log4j incident. And from there, I would love to see like the CIO's organization use that same information to better plan what open source packages we should double down on and which ones we should move away from because they're not good uses of our time. There's a long list of use cases to jump into, but what do you think, Cassie?
Well, I definitely, a short-term use case, I think that having the collection of SBOMs, especially internally, because we're both a consumer and a producer. So being a consumer and having a full, CERT team vulnerability management organization is being able to respond quickly. When something comes out, how can we best direct and have our hundreds of project teams really be able to do quick analysis to say, yes, you may need to investigate further. So just saving the amount of hours and being able to respond quickly and reducing the length of time to be able to respond quickly, that use case is already developing and we've seen improvements by having that data. So Log4j, we're going to talk about it and use that word a couple times today. And being able to quickly identify at least where to go from a heat map standpoint of which offers. We saw the same things when there were different OSs last year. Are we using these, especially for embedded products? You're going to have the same thing from different areas in the SaaS and areas, that kind of the world. From a more extended use case, I would say that the distribution model and understanding your customers better is going to be helpful. Is having this conversation about transparency and SBOM has put that touch point with the customer so much closer. It's like, why do you need this? How are you going to use this? And to take on what Caleb was saying is they're not quite sure how to always use it either. It can be the shiny object this year, but if they're really going to go further with it, it's what value are they going to get? And I'd love Alan to describe what VEX is and sort of that relationship that we're starting to see between SBOM just gives you a list. Yeah, we know it has, this object in it. But do we have to worry about that? And that's, I think, the next step.
Thanks, Cassie. And I think you hit on a really important point, which is, right, SBOM's a data layer. And so one, we're going to need to, as Caleb said, sort of turn that into intelligence, right? Which can then drive action, as Cassie noted. But also there are going to be times where data is nice, but I don't need all the data. I just want you to tell me something about your software. So sort of the attestation model. I'm going to assert this. And one of the real challenges around having increased transparency is that not all vulnerabilities actually put a product or an organization at risk. And so there's a horribly named project, but I think that is incredible potential called VEX. And I named it, so it's my fault. VEX stands for the Vulnerability Exploitability and Exchange. And it's basically a way for an organization to make an attestation that says this product is or is not affected by this vulnerability. So, all right, imagine how much easier all of our jobs would be for Log4j if our upstream suppliers had said, hey, super quick machine readable attestation that says we're not affected by Log4j, or we are, and here's the patch. Instead of having to crawl through everyone's website, or alternatively, going to the handy CISA GitHub, which listed, the thousands of suppliers and thousands of subsequent products. So That's one of the core ideas around attestation. Now, before we go, hopefully we've gotten a few folks who are watching us to say, this seems good. What do I do? So how can folks get started? How can they roll up their sleeves and make this a reality for their organization? Cassie, can we start with you?
Yes. Well, it depends quite a bit on where your organization is sitting, whether you're a producer or a consumer. I would say that the best area to start with is to go to the NIST/SBOM. I'm sure that many of you...
NTIA.
NTIA, sorry. The NTIA SBOM website and also CISA websites on that. I am continuously driving people to that site. And the reason I'm doing that is we're still in our learning journey. So I think that if you're a developer, there's some information there. And if you are a developer who's really into it, there's other places to go to get some more detail. There's been some activities and such that are going through where we've done some plug fests and get really into it. I would also, if you are let's say someone who wants to consume these, there's information on there, but talk specifically with the manufacturers and who's providing it to see what channels that they have for providing the content. If I'm talking with a customer and they say, here's what I'm going to do with it, my answer could be a bit different rather than I want to adjust this because I brand label your product and I want to be able to provide it on. So.
Thanks. No, it's super helpful. And I also want to flag something you said, which is earlier you said, you're both a recipient of inbound data and you ship stuff. And I think it's important to remember that we're all in the supply chain and most of us are in the middle. And so that means that we're going to need to sort of understand how to receive it as well as how to produce this kind of data. Caleb, what, we've got some folks that want to make this happen in their organization. How should they start?
Sure. I can't do much better than Cassie's answer. One nuance I might jump on or pull on a little bit would be the consumer versus producer differentiation and, what our organizations do for the outside world. I think regardless of whether or not the thing that we're building is meant for an outside audience, we've seen tremendous value in an SBOM program only for the things that we build for ourselves in large organizations. And I'm sure that was implied, but I don't have much else to add beyond Cassie's answer.
Great. So as we sort of wrap up our time today, I was wondering, let's talk about sort of the big picture here. Why is this important to get right? And what are some of the benefits that will happen if folks out there say, hey, yeah, this seems not interesting. I want to implement it, but I also want to help in sort of a global community to build this out. Are there some things you can say, hey, this is what's at stake if we get this right versus if we do it poorly?
Yeah, I'll start. What's at stake is that when we are really opening ourselves up to other folks, we need them to understand this is a starting point. We're going to have errors. We're going to not get it right. We may not provide the right level of information to begin with. And this is not the end game. I fully expect in 3-4 years from now, we're going to have so many more answers than we do today. It'll be more automated, digitized. This is very manual. But you shouldn't stop you from starting. If you request it and your supplier may say, I can't give it to you now. Your dev team may say, I don't want to give all this information yet. And so I want to anonymize some of it. And you need to realize that there's there's a lot of grayness right now, and that's okay. It's all starting part of the process. So, we didn't create regulations before the seatbelt was ever invented. The regulations on using a seatbelt were after it was invented. So we're going to have a lot more to do here.
Sure. I'll jump on. So I think what's at stake, among other things, Alan Friedman's sanity. Like he's worked so hard for so many years here. Joking aside, I think anything we can do in our large organizations, in smaller organizations as well, to reduce risk as we build things, products, systems, and put them into production, the less likelihood or impact we have of a cybersecurity event. That increases the likelihood that we have investment and resources internally to do bigger and better things and grow. And when these large organizations that we're talking about and talking to on the call today can grow and innovate, that means better prosperity, better opportunity for people all around the world. I think that's what's really at stake and why SBOMs are important.
Thank you. And I think that's a really nice holistic perspective. The last thing I'm going to say is I see this as the beginning. We don't really know the full power of what we can do with this data. The analogy I think might be the creation of CVE almost 20 years ago, which is to say, giving a vulnerability a number doesn't do anything, doesn't protect your network, doesn't protect your users. But once we have that shared frame of reference and that shared data platform, we now have an entire industry or industries that have built and innovated and found better ways to help people secure their software and produce more quality software. And so again, I'm going to make a quick plug to those of you who sort of are on the innovation side of the house. Think about what you could do with this data. I think there are a lot of organizations going to make a lot of progress and be looking for help in both generating and consuming this. So with that, I'd like to thank Cassie and Caleb for joining us today. And we hope that you'll understand that SBOM is going to be an important part of Team Purple moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechstrongTV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and you may notice that we have a different configuration for this interview. It is because this is the first interview I've done with a real live person, not on Zoom, since RSA 2020, and I am just thrilled beyond belief to have Ricardo Villadiego, who is the founder and CEO of Lumu Technologies, sitting to my right. Ricardo, thank you so much for making the trip to actually come to TechStrong and have this interview with me today. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Charlene. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, location is everything, right?
Definitely.
And you are close enough to be able to come into the office and do this. So I do appreciate your making the trek to come in. I want to talk to you a little bit about some research that your company recently put out on ransomware. But first, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about Lumu.
Sure. Happy to answer that. I do that all the time. So Lumu is a cybersecurity company. Cybersecurity is a large segment. It's one of the biggest concern of the companies nowadays. And what we do at Lumu is that we help companies of all sizes and all verticals to operate cybersecurity proficiently. And that is something that is most needed than ever, right? With the ransomware attacks, the breaches going up and left and right, every company is being forced to operate cybersecurity in a way that they can control the impact of cybercrime in their organizations. We enable them, we empower them to do so and to do so in a very efficient way.
That's great. And to your point, it's necessary. It's no longer, security really needs to be top of mind for any organizations now. It's no longer something that's just lower on the line item of things that we need to get to. So that's really great. So let's talk about this report that your organization put out.
Cool. We do a flashcard on ransomware, and this is the second version that we have built, and it essentially collects the multiple ransomware attacks that have been affecting the companies across the world. There are some very interesting insights that we're providing this time. Number one is that it's becoming a vicious cycle. And it's becoming a vicious cycle because there are more companies paying the ransom, and therefore there are more companies recovering data. And what that tells the bad guys is this is a business. We can come back and make more attacks, and there's more people that is gonna pay, there's more people that is gonna recover the data, and those same people are gonna get affected again. So it's becoming a vicious cycle. And that vicious cycle, it's happening because we're telling the bad guys there's more people willing to pay the ransom. If there's more people willing to pay the ransom, then we're essentially creating an economy, an evil economy in which the bad guys are understanding that they can make more bucks for the attacks that they are making. In our view, the best way to break that vicious cycle is to ensure that the companies cannot be affected in the first place. So it comes with building the right capabilities that helps organizations to operate cybersecurity efficiently, to identify when they are in front of an attack and make the adjustment that they need to make in their cybersecurity, in their cyber defenses, to ensure that those attacks no longer provides a risk for them. The other thing that we identify is ransomware is not something that happens out of thin air, Charlene. And there's this belief that a ransomware comes and in the next 5 minutes all your files are encrypted. That's not the case. It is true that once the ransomware starts encrypting, there's little that you can do, but typically what we have found in the companies that are being affected by ransomware and the more than 1,000 companies that we're monitoring in real time is that way before the ransomware piece start to encrypt, there were signs within the network that the company was compromised. What are those signs? Contacts with what we call precursors of ransomware. When a network starts exhibiting contacts with threats like Emotet, a threat of 2014, TrickBot 2012, QuackBot 2014, Zloader. When those type of contacts emerge from the network that we're monitoring, there is a clear indication that the bad guys are within the network and they're trying to identify what is the next step that they want to do in order to maximize the harm that they can cause in the organization. And in most cases, it's more than 2 or 3 months where we identify those initial contacts of ransomware precursors that will lead into a ransomware attack. So there's plenty of time to mitigate, to avoid the ransomware attack. To become in effect.
Yeah, so I've actually heard that there are certain kind of telltale signs, and the botnets are certainly the Trojans, I guess I should say, are certainly part of that. Are there, is there a particular timeline that the ransomware kind of goes through? I mean, once it hits the network. You said 2 to 3 months it could be in there, but are there instances where it's been in there even longer and just kind of collecting information?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing nowadays in the attacks is the first thing that they want to do is to extract information. And they extract information to maximize the harm they can cause in organizations so that they make an extortion type of attacks. The first thing that they do is, pay me the ransom. If you don't pay me the ransom, now I have the clear data that I can make it public. So that takes time. Number one, to identify where the data is, and number two, to extract the data from the organizations. Like I said at the beginning of the interview, the best way to break the vicious cycle is to avoid those attacks to happen, is to avoid those attacks to become effective in the first time, right? How companies can do that? Well, there's one thing that companies produce all the time, more so in a world that is fully connected, which is network metadata. As we speak here, our networks are producing vast amounts of network metadata. And that network metadata tell us if our assets are in contact with adversarial infrastructure, if you identify contacts with Zloader, with TrickBot, with Emotet, there are threats that are well known. And they tend to fly under the radar because they're old threats, but old threats that the bad guys are using to get into networks. Right. So when you identify those contacts and you eliminate those contacts, indirectly, you're eliminating the evil effect that those contacts may cause in your organizations, which are a ransomware attack or the exfiltration of valuable data from your organization.
Okay, all right. So, and this is kind of universal to every company then. I mean, if they, they're working with a network.
Absolutely. I mean, the companies are becoming more connected than ever because of the pandemic. And one of the things that are most critical to ensure that you implement within your organization is the ability to consolidate and collect this network metadata in a way that's consistent, in a way that's reliable, so that you can all the time assess what we call the state of compromise of your organization. And I often tell to my customers, I make this analogy, right? When you ask the CFO of an organization, what's the EBITDA? They tell you with the cents, the EBITDA. And they even tell you some ideas of how you can improve the EBITDA. You may not like those ideas, right? Yeah. But when you ask a director of cybersecurity, a CISO, what is your state of compromise? Typically is unknown. Even after we had deployed millions and millions of dollars in tools and people, is unknown what is the state of compromise. That is something that we need to bring up to the front, because that is what's going to help us to ensure that we evolve and that we improve consistently our cybersecurity posture in our organization. And what Lumo does is Lumo illuminates that state of compromise within the organization. It tells in black and white what are the assets that are contacting or attempting to contact adversarial infrastructure. And if that's the case, now you have the information that you need to act decisively to mitigate those contacts and the evil effect that may come after those contacts.
Well, it sounds like part of a really great kind of multi-pronged strategy for cybersecurity, because obviously knowledge is power. Understanding what the state of the network is and what the state of the network compromise is certainly can help an organization take its cybersecurity to the next step to ensure that any ransomware that might be leaking or lurking within their organization is mitigated. But what are some of the other things that you guys are seeing with respect to ransomware, as far as maybe the prevalence of ransomware? Whether you've seen an increase, and are there specific kind of company profiles, if you will, of organizations that are being targeted perhaps more than others?
A couple of observations. Right. Number one, no company is safe, right? We, in the past, tend to believe that these bad guys were focusing only on large companies. That's no longer the case. We see school districts being affected. We see small businesses being affected. We see, of course, large organizations being affected. Those are the ones that make the news. But for every large organization that is making the news, there were 100 small businesses that were impacted. And in some cases, it cost them the business, right? So no company is safe. Number two is a threat that is affecting the world. It is true that 43% of the attacks are consolidated in North America, but 29% of the attacks are affecting Latin American companies. 32% of these attacks are affecting European companies. So it's affecting the world. Why more North America? Well, it's a more connected ecosystem, right? One thing that we see that is very curious, in addition to the two that I mentioned, is that even though small businesses are being affected significantly, the perception of risk that they realize about this threat is not enough. Yeah. So there's a lot of education that we still need to do on small and medium businesses. Their managed service providers are very concerned, but the SMBs aren't. And I imagine that is the case because they rely a lot on the managed service providers. So the managed service providers are highly concerned, but the SMBs aren't concerned. So something good is happening with the managed service providers. We need to help them to translate that concern to the SMB so that they can do an even better job protecting the small and medium businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the role that an SMB may play in the larger ecosystem for a larger vendor, maybe they're a supplier for a larger vendor, they're connected to that larger vendor's network. We talk about those third-party breaches. That alone is one reason for an SMB to be very, very aware and frankly, cognizant of the impact that a ransomware on that organization can have on their entire supply chain and their entire...
Absolutely. And to add on that, one of the things that we're seeing is that the larger companies, they're forcing the third-party ecosystem to adhere their practices on compromise measurement. It's funny that the main reason why we're investing in cybersecurity is to avoid being compromised, yet the measurement of compromise is usually not something that is done consistently. Lumo brings that front and center to the cybersecurity industry. It's building that culture of measurement of compromise, which is the ultimate goal in our organizations.
Yeah, well, it just makes sense, and it probably would help out a lot more if more organizations actually measured that on a regular basis. So that's good stuff. If organizations or people are interested in taking a look at the ransomware flashcards, do you guys have them readily available on your site?
It is in our website, www.lumo.io. And you will go to our blog and you will take a look at our ransomware flashcards along additional information that we have available for all customers. One thing that I like to make sure that everyone knows is that there is a freemium version of Lumo that is available on our website as well. Any company can open a free account. That account is free forever, and they can start taking the journey of measurement compromise in their organizations.
Very cool. I imagine for organizations that hadn't really considered that in the past, that's going to be very, very interesting for them. Well, Ricardo, thank you so much for coming into the office, coming into the studio, and having the conversation with me. I do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Charlene.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Brian Woodworth, or Woody Woodworth, who's a solutions strategist over at Aviatrix. Woody, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Charlene.
Great. So can you Well, I want to talk to you, first of all, about a couple things that are happening in networking and security and really the complexity that's out there right now and how maybe companies might want to reconsider the way that they are securing their networking. But before we do that, I want to see if perhaps you could introduce us to Aviatrix.
Sure. At a very high level, Aviatrix is a distributed networking and network security platform. It's multi-cloud native, which means it understands all of the concepts and objects of all of the major clouds. And it's deployed and managed through a centralized motion through a controller ecosystem. And it has a very cool forensics and analysis and day two operations tool called Copilot. So those are kind of the three key components of the platform. You have a very scalable multi-cloud data plane, which is moving all of your data in an encrypted way. So it's kind of your network, lock, stock, and barrel there. We have a controller where you express intent to, and the controller obeys and abstracts away some of the complexities of cloud and just will exercise your intent uniformly across one or more clouds. And then we have great visibility in day two operations with Copilot.
Awesome. Awesome. Sounds like a very useful tool for organizations, especially as we increasingly find organizations using multi-cloud infrastructure and just hybrid infrastructures in general. So, which obviously has increased the complexity of securing their infrastructures. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what you think organizations can do to kind of help simplify securing their network infrastructure, especially considering the fact that we have so many different elements these days that do make up the network. So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, what you guys are seeing in the networking infrastructure space as it relates to security. What is making it so difficult, especially with these multi-cloud and these hybrid infrastructures?
Yeah, well, there's several factors and they're all related. But let's begin with the idea of networking security embedded in the network. Where does this come from? I mean, this idea has been around a long time. It was attempted many moons ago in the hardware space, but it was too complicated and error-prone to pull off. It became more popular as we had virtualization platforms like, VMware, OpenStack, Hyper-V, and this, has reached a good level of maturity, and there's comfort around this. But it's very different in cloud because cloud is more complicated and more agile and more vast yet than private clouds, as we would say, like VMware, for example. So what rules in cloud, what we call the operational model of cloud, is infrastructure as code, continuous development. And the application developers and owners have really mastered this, and it's reached a very high level of effectiveness and security. The problem, it's reached a very high level of effectiveness and capability. The problem is that the security stack and platform underneath it isn't as agile and sophisticated. It's not as agile insofar as it's not really a technology problem, it's a person problem. It's rare to find the kind of persona that's both very strong in development, but also very strong in security and security policy, right? This persona just doesn't exist in the industry. So while the clouds are developing some pretty impressive capabilities in their native security stacks, they're very hard to utilize, organize, and manage altogether unless you are, an expert at coding is your daily bread and butter.
So I understand this problem, and it makes a lot of sense that, obviously, if you've got an on-premises infrastructure, you've basically only got one thing that you need to really focus on when it comes to security. But multi-cloud infrastructure really just introduces a new level of, not only complexity, but just the depth and the breadth of things that need to be managed and secured on a regular basis. And done well can be, staggering. And I think, a lot of organizations kind of suffer from paralysis of analysis just because of they're kind of become like deer in the headlights when it comes to security. And so there are certain things that maybe they just aren't thinking about. And I wonder if we've kind of taken it maybe a little too far, or if we just haven't done a very good job as an industry teaching folks what they need to do to keep these multi-cloud and complex infrastructures more secure.
Yeah, no, those are all very good points. A lot of it is about a skills gap and about talent and about getting your IT teams and security teams comfortable and revved up on these different tools. Another part about it, though, is just the speed at which these security and IT systems have to move, and these security professionals, IT professionals, getting caught in a bind where they're trying to build the airplane in flight. So what do you advocate as a CISO or a CIO? Do you want to focus on training? Do you want to try to focus on additional talent acquisition, which is very hard right now? Do you want to focus on just trying to keep up with the pace of business? So, IT and security was already very busy. And then to try to retrain them in the middle of this cloud migration or cloud adoption motion it's not impossible. It's a lot of work. So what we see happening more in networking and network security is understandably IT professionals and security professionals trying to kind of take these trainings and certifications in bite sizes. This is compounded by multi-cloud because it's more overwhelming for them, and multi-cloud absolutely is a thing. So they naturally and understandably fall back to what they know best, which are more traditional practices, more traditional tools and platforms. So virtual firewalls tend to rule the roost for cloud security. This solves some problems, but introduces some other ones. The security is not embedded in the network. It can't move as quickly or effectively as a software-defined security stack, and it's more complicated and difficult to manage. And there can be some problems with scale and cost, and so it's a double-edged sword.
So what do you think is going to be the best way for organizations to kind of solve this conundrum that they find themselves in, especially from a security perspective?
Well, I mean, at Aviatrix, we would advocate to use a platform like ours, or to take a look at our platform to help solve these challenges, insofar as it takes a lot of the magic and mystery out of maintaining cloud security in an embedded programmatic way, right? We are cloud native. We speak the APIs of all the major clouds. So it helps streamline and address this skills gap. We're a uniform Terraform provider. So you can consolidate and use all of your Terraform automation to Aviatrix, which helps also with the differentiation of the different kinds of styles and profiles that the cloud offers. And then having the security in the network gives you better speed and agility. If you can programmatically scale your network and security isn't a bolt-on or an addition or a square peg or an outside-in thing, then you can really stay abreast of all of the speed and innovation that the cloud has to offer. There is a lot of shadow IT in cloud. There's a lot of sprawl, right? Businesses are in a mad stampede now, especially in the post-COVID world, to modernize and do this digital transformation, if you will, of their key lines of business. And cloud is the place where that's happening. And they don't want security to stand in the way. And security doesn't want to be, a bottleneck. So with a platform like Aviatrix, it gives you a greater amount of visibility, control, and speed to help keep up with all this application build and innovation that's going on.
So besides the technology, are there certain best practices that organizations should be keeping in mind when they are looking at the security of their infrastructures, especially in this multi-cloud world that we're living in these days?
Oh my gosh, there are many. Where do I begin? Let's begin at just a fundamental level. Cloud gives you the ability to do something called microsegmentation, which is to create concentric rings of security, because your software stack is now, your networking stack is now software driven. So it's intelligent and it can be distributed to very small places like the actual, NIC or network interface card of the virtual machine, and then in circles outside of that. So the first thing you need is a really good defense in depth, almost like a zero trust policy, because there's a lot of lateral movement in cloud. There's a lot of one host getting compromised and it moving laterally from host to host, because it is hard to implement and orchestrate these microsegmentation policies at scale, because they're getting really big. And again, unless you're an ace programmer and have a great tool set, it's hard to maintain and grow this. But having a good microsegmentation zero trust strategy is very important. Looking at the other axis, which this is called east-west, affectionately in cloud, lateral. Yep. The other axis, north-south, internet in, or sometimes corporate in through a private pipe, is also equally as important, if not more important. And there, you need to focus on having good application intelligence. You need to be able to analyze threats from a variety of different sources, either from their IP identity, from their signature. You need to be able to do this at scale, and know that when you create a virtual machine or a virtual workload or service in cloud, it's right next door to the internet. It's very different than on-prem, because in on-prem, you could build a moat. You could surround your applications with these metal firewalls and use traditional network segmentation to really constrain internet access. This concept of a DMZ being the fortified keep in the middle of your network. The cloud is very different, right? It's swipe a credit card, it's build a service, it's put a little public IP on that, and presto changeo, you're talking to the internet. So the surface area and the business risk is very different in cloud. So having a good north-south strategy where you have good control over where your internet is coming and going and good analysis of that traffic is key.
All right. Well, certainly words that I think organizations can certainly live by as they seek to improve the security of their multi-cloud environments. Woody, thank you so much for walking me through it and talking to me a little bit about security and networking infrastructure and ways organizations can hopefully tame this beast that we call security. Thank you again. I do appreciate your time and your expertise.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
You bet. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Patrick Allen, who is the VP of Artificial Intelligence over at Uniphore. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I think you are the first VP of Artificial Intelligence that I've ever spoken with. So
interesting.
There you go. It's definitely not a job title that is very popular or prevalent these days. So tell me a little bit about Uniphore, please.
Sure. So Uniphore is a conversational AI company that has been around for about 13 years, was originally founded in India with the idea of trying to use AI technology to provide extra value to customer service conversations. In particular, we're very strong at AI that can actually listen to humans talking to other humans. A lot of the time when we think about conversational AI, we think about a person chatting with a machine of some sort, like your Alexa or your Siri or something like that. And that's an interesting problem. But a problem that's even more difficult is getting a machine to understand people talking to each other. Because when we talk to something like an Alexa, we tend to dumb down our syntax and our vocabulary, and we speak in a very simple way to it. And we usually say things that, it would expect us to say. Whereas when people are talking to each other, we just kind of assume that everybody speaks English more or less fluently. And, we're perfectly fine with having run-on sentences and multiple ideas embedded into each other and restarting our sentences and making corrections and, all the things that humans do in conversation that's actually really tricky for a machine to understand. So Uniphore is a company that has been developing AI that focuses on understanding, in particular in the domain of customers talking to customer service agents, but specializing in this human-to-human conversation understanding AI.
Interesting. So it is truly natural language processing.
Yes, truly natural, not this unnatural. I'm talking to my Alexa, trying to get it to turn off the lights, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I could tell you, I've chirped up my Alexa more than once just by kind of. I was like, wait, no, that's not what I meant. So yeah, but so that's really kind of interesting, and it's almost like the next frontier of AI, if you will, when it comes to having those conversations with machines. Do you think are you guys striving to get to a point where one day it will be as natural, talking to a machine will be as natural as talking to another person?
Well, that is a great question. That's definitely our goal. The interesting thing with language is that, despite decades of, linguistics and people trying to create computer systems that understand language, we still don't have a really good idea of exactly how humans do understand each other and how we form our sentences in the first place and how I understand the things that you're saying to me. So when we don't have that roadmap, it's hard to really formalize, okay, like here are the things that we need to do to get from A to Z to do there. And so it's an interesting field because, it's constantly building on itself and making new discoveries. And, it is a science plus an art, all wrapped up in a technology.
Yeah, and it's constantly evolving too. I mean, if you think about syntax and the way we use words that, traditionally have not been used, I just can, somebody just started using the word crunchy to me all the time. Yeah. Like, oh, we really want to make this crunchy. I'm like, I don't think an AI being or entity would actually recognize that as enticing or, a positive. They would just think that, it's like a potato chip crunchy. So
that's right. And in linguistics, they call that linguistic drift, which means, over time and also over geographies, people will start to use different words for things, different phrases for things. And that's how different dialects develop and even different languages over time. Right. In AI, there's something very similar that we call data drift, which is where maybe you have trained your AI model on a certain set of data that makes certain assumptions. Mm-hmm. And over time, those assumptions might change in the world that the AI model is operating in. And so you have to have some way to kind of reassess the data that exists in the world and see if your model is still accurately representing those data. So one example is, over the past 2 years, we've probably all gotten on the phone with a customer service agent and said something about COVID or the coronavirus or the pandemic and all that sort of thing. When all of this was first starting out, a lot of these AI models that had been put in place for customer service systems didn't know what that was. They didn't have the word COVID. They didn't have the word coronavirus. They might have had pandemic, but it didn't figure prominently in what they were supposed to recognize. Mm-hmm. So in a pretty short order of time, all of these models had to change to allow, the things that people were now interested in and talking about.
So let's kind of take a look at that idea of emotional intelligence with respect to artificial intelligence, because
sure.
I think emotions actually play a very large role in kind of helping parse this out. So how does emotional intelligence actually factor into artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've been talking a lot about language, and language is certainly a significant aspect of how we communicate. And a lot of sort of the AI that you see out there might treat language as if it's this independent thing that we can study and learn how to do in, its own separate box. But as human beings, we know that there's so much more to communication than that. Mm-hmm. As I'm talking to you, it's not only the words that are coming out of my mouth that you're paying attention to, I'm gesticulating with my hands, and that might have some communicative value to it. As I'm talking, you're nodding and doing what we call back channeling, which is sort of the, I hear you kind of communication that is nonverbal. So there are all these nonverbal things that figure into sort of the context of understanding the message that is going back and forth between two people. Another significant aspect of that is just looking at people's facial expressions. And, if I were to say something and you suddenly looked puzzled, that would be a cue to me, a very nonverbal cue to maybe, dive a little bit more into what I just said. Mm-hmm. Or, in the case of, say, a sales call or something, if I'm mentioning some aspect of what I'm selling or I'm talking about the price of it or something, and you suddenly look, unhappy or surprised or something like that, that's another communicative cue to me that I can add to the language and other aspects of the interaction to have a much better understanding of, what you're thinking, what I'm thinking, what this whole communication is all about.
Interesting. So how can organizations use this then? Obviously in a sales environment, that would be super, super helpful. But how can they take this information and embed it into an AI environment and actually use it to their benefit?
Right. So there's been a lot of research out there just sort of about emotional intelligence in sales. and studies that have kind of shown, the advantage that you have of having a sales team that are kind of emotionally tuned into what is going on in the room. Any salesperson knows that the more you can make a personal connection to the person that you're trying to sell to, the more likely they are to want to say yes to you.
Sure.
They also know that, when you're in front of a room, you're sort of taking in all this information about how people are reacting to the pitch that you're giving or certain aspects of it, and using that information to kind of tailor where you're going and the message that you're giving. So, one thing that we realized, we were thinking about this before, but during the pandemic, it really sort of brought to the forefront how when you try to bring these types of communications over a video channel, Zoom or what have you, you're sort of narrowing your perspective on being able to look at how people are reacting to what you're saying. And so this is where we think, AI can be, sort of like this partner in the virtual room with you, sort of just looking at what are people's expressions and, making some educated guesses about how they might be feeling and trying to communicate that to a salesperson or anybody else who's on the call.
Interesting. So I imagine that this is kind of light years ahead of where we are from a digital transformation standpoint these days with regards to customer, customer service, customer relations. This seems like this would be so much, such a great tool for organizations to use. Are we there yet, though? Is the technology actually there yet that organizations can use this in their, whether it be their sales environment or their customer service or any other part of the organization?
Yeah, Charlene, that's a great question. And, we put this product out there because we do feel like we are at a point now where the technology is mature enough that it will add real value to what salespeople need and, in other types of interactions as well. Mm-hmm. The main point here, I think, is, I personally would not want to rely solely on something that is trying to infer what you might be feeling from your facial expressions, mm-hmm. Because that's a pretty narrow channel of information right there. But what we can do is what we call multimodal understanding, which is taking the language that people are using, the facial expressions they're making, the gestures that they're making, some knowledge about the context that the whole conversation is occurring in, mm-hmm. Even the tone of their voice. We might say something like, hey, nice day, isn't it? And the words on that might sound positive, but if I say that in a sarcastic tone of voice, and if it's raining outside, that I'm communicating a completely different message. Mm-hmm. So it's pulling in all of these various sources of information and then fusing them together into a sort of singular semantic representation, a single message that's going to be much more powerful than you get if you're just trying to get a machine to understand the words that people are saying, which is how most of your, Alexas and conversational AI today is working.
Interesting. Well, this will be really interesting to see in action one of these days. Do you think we're going to start seeing the stuff in the market relatively soon?
Yeah, there have been a few different products. I mean, there's one coming out of Unifor that we've announced a couple months ago, and some other companies are also working on and announcing different multimodal and emotion AI based mm-hmm. systems. Some of these are more controversial than others, and you just have to Google it to, get an idea about what I'm talking about. But I do think that we're getting to a point where the technology is getting out into the market. There will be some, bumps in the road, and we'll figure out a little bit better how these kinds of things fit well into, the needs that we have as a society. But yeah, I think from here we're only going to see more applications, and as we get more data in, better models and better technology.
Sure, it's all about the data at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for walking me through this idea of AI and emotional intelligence. It's a brave new world out there, and I think we're going to see some really interesting things happening in the space in the near future. So thank you again for walking me through it. I do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Charlene. Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
TechStrong TV.
Of the great pleasure of being joined by Fleming Shi. Fleming is CTO with Barracuda Networks. Welcome, Fleming.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Great to have you here. So let's start out, if you would introduce yourself, tell us a little bit of your background, and for the few people on the planet who may not know what Barracuda Networks is, let them know about Barracuda Networks.
Sure. My name is Fleming, been with Barracuda since 2004. Joined the company to start building the web security products, and evolved into multiple products and multiple engineering teams. Right now I'm the Chief Technology Officer, managing a lot of the incubation projects and a lot of technology advancements that we need to push, and also really kind of just getting all the products unified together behind the scene, building the trust platform or threat intelligence platform that we're serving our customer with. Yeah, and Barracuda has been around for a long time. Yeah, almost 20 years. But really, we have transformed to become a very much a SaaS-focused security company. And of course, we still support on-prem and physical hardware because our customers have needs, let it be privacy or governance requirements. We're there to make sure those modalities still exist for them. But today, we're focused on email security. We're focused on data, network, and application security. So it covers a whole variety of different attack surfaces for our customers. And with that, also we have a MSP business unit as well to actually help our customers when they don't have the resources and don't have the talent to run things on their own. We go through our MSP partners to actually support them and solving their issues. So the same ransomware attacks it's everywhere, right? So it touches everybody. So we want to make sure the full range of our capabilities are available to everyone.
Fantastic. Yeah. My things have changed since those days. I remember when Barracuda started, and
that's right.
All-in-one appliance, UTM, kind of that was the value prop and wonderful one that it was, and now moving into a SaaS model as well.
Right.
Well, we were just chatting briefly before about our last time at RSA in 2020, and things were on a certain trajectory, and cloud was happening and starting to pick up steam, and cloud native, and lots of good things in security, and poof, we're back here 2.5 years later about.
That's
and some things have changed.
Yeah.
The world's a little different. I mean, we still have a lot of security threats and some of the same old ones, but we have to think about security a little bit differently. How do you position things now that where we are today? What's different and why?
Definitely. So from my perspective, I was here in 2020. Actually, the last RSA that was in person for me, and it's really surreal to be here now again in person. I actually went on the floor and met a lot of folks, and actually ran into a lot of Barracuda folks, and what I think here is the transformation really took place. Cloud was already moving, SaaS was already moving, especially Microsoft 365 adoption was already on a rise. I think the pandemic really kind of accelerated a lot of that, actually putting people in their home, actually using maybe not so secure environments to still have to provide the ability for them to do work. So through the pandemic, we talked about all sorts of phishing attacks, ransomware attacks that's targeted, even actually impersonating WHO, those type of situations, which was kind of sad, how the bad guys were kind of taking advantage of the pandemic. But really, the reality is that the perimeter doesn't exist. We are using zero trust now. We invested quite a bit in the zero trust access capabilities for our product suite to actually deliver those solutions so they can work from home safely. Also, I believe the security aspect, it's starting to shape up. The nation state sponsored attacks are there. We know the recent situations. Ransomware suddenly is kind of being, I would say, put into a second spot for wiperware is coming out, right? So destructive malware that is more dangerous in the sense where you don't have anyone to negotiate with. You have problems. You must have your data protection in the right place to actually recover for your business. So I think overall, I believe the SaaS continue to grow. Cloud native is a must right now because how quickly we have to evolve and actually build up the capabilities and the scale to support our customers, and also how customers are using SaaS. It's really making application security a very interesting topic. That's really about API security, bot protection, as well as the client side, because a lot of the applications today is less of the server side. A lot of the work, rendering or interaction with the app is done on the client side. So client side is an important thing for us to focus on. So there are many changes. I believe also the security landscape is much more complex. So a lot of the small, medium-sized enterprises are probably looking for help through MSPs or MSSPs. So providing tools to them, it's also very important to make sure the solutions we have is available. Yeah.
Okay, you said a lot there. There's a lot of great things there too, and I concur with much of it. It's interesting the flip the switch, people working from home, pandemic situation. Some folks, we'll go back to the old normal. We can't really change a system as big as this and with some of the fundamentals of it without some lasting consequences. And one of the things that I've seen, and both for myself and also practitioners, CISOs, is they've rethought their networks. They've rethought their on-prem. Yes, they've moved the data center to the cloud, but they've also moved the network to the cloud, to some service provider.
That's right.
The corporate network isn't there anymore, at least certainly not in the way it was. The office building, whoever's going back to that, whether it's a few or a lot, that's not the network they used to run. It's a third-party provider. It's all kind of third-party, and you're managing security in a much different way.
Yeah. Definitely. I think also it's just software, the capability of software for every business. I think every business have some type of software involved to support their customers, right? Starbucks, for example, they have an application that basically helps you buy coffee. And all those things are basically requires application level security, and probably it's going to be running in the cloud, and all these things requires security posture measurements and be constant and continuous monitoring who is in your network and how your IAM is working for your developers as well as your DevOps. So there's quite a bit of things to worry about now, and plus don't forget software supply chain is always going to be a
very
target.
Relevant.
Yeah.
Yep. It is. It's interesting because we've definitely shifted from the perimeter to the perimeter's gone, and now zero trust. And I think some of us probably made that shift earlier than later. But as businesses have gone digital for themselves, for the customers, their partners, their employees, that changes everything, because now you're talking about mobile apps tying into backend services over APIs that were maybe only met for kind of egress, ingress type integration between apps. And now it's talking to web platforms and mobile apps and third-party providers, and you're using SaaS providers.
That's right.
You yourself, as well as, of course, your customers. That's a lot of that complexity, right? That's this fabric of software and intercommunications across whatever number of APIs and technologies and protocols it's using.
Yes, definitely, and I believe that is sort of the formula for future, how things are going to work. So we have to think about cybersecurity in a more comprehensive manner. So even for our email business, we looked at, it's not just about one type of threat that we're going to stop. We're looking at more holistically a package or plan for our customers, so they can actually get in, not only protecting against email-borne zero-day threats, but also spear phishing. Also, make sure you have archive if you have compliance requirements, as well as you have a backup, right? Especially your Office 365 environments, SharePoints, and OneDrive. So packaging these together, solving real use cases like ransomware attacks, wiperware scenarios, is what we're trying to target. And I think it's better because many years ago, Barracuda had a concept of CUDA shop, which means some customer had more than one Barracuda product. Now, a lot of our solution and plans are really from good, better, and best all the way to the best package we have. Is basically multiple products together helping our customers. And everyone who's using Barracuda today, a new customer or someone shifting to these plans, are basically CUDA shops in our way of thinking. Yeah.
Since we're talking you as the CTO, I'm also a CTO. I'm really interested and curious about how things like API first, API centric application development, microservices, different chain. We've really rethought software in the cloud and how that's built.
Yeah.
Because it's not just bundling package, products together on, sort of buy it all together, save a few dollars. It's about how it works together.
That's right.
But it's got to be more than just kind of bolted together. It's really got to seamlessly function and share information, use services across different products and things like that. How has that changed about how you think about creating?
That's a great question, great topic.
Products.
Yeah.
I'm actually talking about this today at 1 o'clock, so I can't help it.
Yeah, what's exciting for me is being the technology person at Barracuda and working with very smart, very talented engineers is we understand APIs first is very important. The way we looked at it is we transitioned from basically appliance kind of centric kind of a product line in the early days. So we had a large install base. We had over 200,000 customers. The install base is very big. So how do we actually do something that is kind of ubiquitous for them in terms of capabilities? Plus, we have to make sure our SaaS is operating as good and as performant as the appliance, vice versa. So what we did is we actually took a bunch of the capabilities and created microservices out of them, created APIs and SDKs to allow the firmware on those pre-existing appliances continue to function and utilize these, I will call the superpowers of these new microservices we created.
Interesting.
And they actually fit into the SaaS as well by default. So you end up with customers who are happy with their appliance and just taking their time to transition to the SaaS world. And that's okay. We still provide the capabilities. So we have enough ability to actually stop modern threats using these microservices. Of course, things have shifted, right? So if you think about, there's no more Exchange server. Now Microsoft has Office 365 and has Graph APIs. So we have created new capabilities in the SaaS to allow our customer to look at how they want to handle their security in the future. So it's a nice bridge for the customers who have been loyal with Barracuda and basically eventually get to a point where they're fully in the SaaS world and they have the capabilities they had in the past plus more. And one of those things is really forensics, like the ability to identify threat and take care of them and respond to them in an automated fashion. And instead of trying to brush up your skills in PowerShell, you can actually rely on Barracuda's capabilities and all the tools that we have already built to eliminate all the existing threats and maybe even hidden threats in your inbox. Yeah, so to me, I think it's a nice transition we did for not only for our product line, our solution to move to SaaS, more of the SaaS centric, but also for the customer, they get to enjoy what they had and make their way into the offerings we have today in their schedule, in their own way of actually getting there. So I feel we did the right thing. And
but it's great when you can do that. We can bring customers with you as your technology platform, your architecture's evolved. It sounds like you've kind of gone from those being perimeter edge devices to being edge part of the solution of the whole cloud.
Yeah, exactly. And what's neat about that is because we have that common set of microservices that allow all the products, including SaaS and on-prem devices if they need it, to interact with these microservices. So it builds this threat intelligence platform, allowing us to detect something that happens, let's just say happens in Europe today, And the first instinct we get that on any of our product will automatically inform the rest of the customers and behind the scenes. So that IOC will be kept very quickly, right? So if you think about that, the foundation for building product is just awesome, because you have the ability to make sure we're not only detecting in real time, but making sure the information is available to all the customer, all the different products behind the scene that's integrated into that trust platform. Yeah.
Interesting, great. I'm curious too, because I wish we had more time, because I'd love to get into a lot more of this. Coming back to RSA after 2+ years, you talked about some of the things that have changed. How about your observation, me, personally, just of meeting colleagues, and what are we talking about now that we weren't talking about then? And yes, it's nice to not have the Zoom screen in between us, but the interactions I've sensed have changed.
Definitely. I was able to get an in-person demo of some of the products people are building. That's really cool, and be able to really meet friends and partners and ex-Barracuda employees and who are doing different things now. But genuinely, it's really nice to be back in person. On the technology side, I see things that we thought about 3-4 years ago. Was like just in the beginning, XDR, for example, is now everywhere, right? So you can see people are building platforms out there, enabling data aggregation and doing threat hunting, building on top of AI. All that stuff is happening, and also we also do that, but we offer it through our SOC as a service, because we want to make sure the folks who are lacking resources get their capabilities through the MSP. But also I see folks who are, a lot of focus on ZTNA, and which is also something we invested into during the pandemic. So feels nice that it's like a validation of what we did while we were working from home and thinking about what's the right thing to provide to our customers. It feels really good. Yeah.
It's one thing to read about it on the net. It's another to see it.
Yeah. And folks are excited about
it.
Yeah. It's just everyone is very excited about these new things to fight the cyber crimes out there. So yeah.
Well, congratulations on being back. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, so folks that want to know more about Barracuda, visit the site. What things might they have available to them? What resources can they have that might be of help?
Yeah, actually, what's really cool is you can go up to Barracuda's blogs.barracuda.com. You can find a whole bunch of discussions we have on various different attack surfaces, threat vectors, right? And also, if you or maybe started to think about securing your Microsoft 365 environment a little more and understand the capabilities that we have, go ahead and run what we call the email threat scan. It's scan.barracuda.com. And with that, you can actually identify the threats that's already in your inbox. And we also have another cool product called Data Inspector. You can use that to actually look at your OneDrive, your SharePoint, to see if there's any hidden malware. I tell you, there are a lot, because we see it. So
I'm sure there is. I can only imagine.
Yeah, use those tools and try it out. Yeah.
All right, Fleming. Fleming Sheep, CTO with Barracuda Networks. Thanks, man. Appreciate talking to you.
It was a great pleasure.
You too.
This is TechstrongTV.
I have the great pleasure of being joined by Hugh Njamanji, who is president with Anomaly. Welcome, Hugh.
Thank you.
Good to be chatting with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. If you can share a little bit of your background and tell us about Anomaly.
Sure. Okay. So I've been in the Silicon Valley for a long time now, with stints at Hewlett-Packard, Apple Computer in the early days, and started doing stuff in security. About a little over 20 years ago, founded a company called ArcSight, which was a player in the SIEM space, still going strong, and launched Anomaly about 9 years ago now. And at the time, we were called ThreatStream. And so we have a suite of products that has culminated in an offering that is now focused on XDR, which is obviously the hottest new buzzword, but also perfectly describes what we've been building. So it's a great synergy for us. ThreatStream is really all about threat intelligence and allows organizations to both generate their own threat intel, but also consume commercial threat intel from sources like DeepSight, iSight, CrowdStrike, etc. And also lets them partake of community-generated threat intelligence and also intelligence that comes from ISACs, information sharing communities. And recently, it's becoming clear that threat intelligence is a very important component of a security in-depth program because it really has to do with understanding who your adversaries are, what they're doing, what their intent is, and whether they've been seen on your premises, basically. Is there activity in your network, in your organization? And the reason XDR is so relevant for us is because XDR is essentially an aspiration that is culminating at a point that I think multiple different technologies have been converging on. So we've had sort of unifying technologies before. SIEM was really about bringing logs from all different kinds of devices, whether it's switches, routers, point security products, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and being able to bring that information together, correlate it, and identify actionable incidents. Similarly with EDR, very similar approach focused on hosts. With mail security products, again, a similar approach focused on what's happening in your mail infrastructure. And that makes it easier to address things like phishing and other types of activities that are typically exploited through mail. What that has resulted in is even though these are unifying technologies, each of them has become its own large silo. And so the idea behind XDR, as we see it, is to be able to go across the new silos and infer information about attacks and attackers from tying together information that is visible separately in each category, but not visible together. And so to that extent, we've introduced a cloud product that will take telemetry from SIEMs, telemetry from EDRs, telemetry from mail security products, telemetry from cloud deployments, basically telemetry across the board, all the way down to network flows and also log events, and marry that with large volumes of threat intelligence that you may have licenses to. So a lot of threat intelligence is commercially available. Also, a lot of it is available for free from interested communities. So to be able to combine that volume of intelligence that's now available with the telemetry coming from your silos is a big data challenge of today.
And a tough one to solve on your own. I mean,
that's right.
Busy lives, lots of work to do.
Exactly.
So the age-old question, is something a product or is something a feature? Do you see XDR as a product in and of itself, or is it something that's sort of horizontal, goes across multiple offerings for a company like yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think XDR, to some extent, is in the eye of the beholder, because when the large analyst organizations get on the bandwagon with a new acronym or a new buzzword, everybody relabels themselves. Yep. So from most categories of product, the next version of their product is now XDR, even if last year it was SIEM or last year it was EDR, etc. For us, we see ourselves as a sort of horizontal technology that goes across the different silos. And so from our own self-interested perspective, that is the true XDR. Is because the X in XDR stands for extended, right? And so D and R are detection and response. But the way to achieve the promise of XDR is to apply it across all the information that you're collecting. And so you could call us an open XDR system as opposed to the next version of any one of those silos, if that makes sense.
As opposed to XDR potentially becoming its own next silo, right?
That's right. That's right.
We tend to do that. We relabel everything, everybody gloms onto the hot label, and Nobody knows what it means anymore. Unfortunately, that's the pattern we repeat over and over.
And in fact, we hesitate to even bring up the term XDR with customers. Analysts are super interested in it, but with customers, we focus on our use cases. Because at the end of the day, if you explain a use case to a customer and they say, yes, we have that problem, and we ask, do you have a solution for that? And they say no, then the next part of the conversation is, if we show you a solution that works, would that be an interesting conversation? And so to me, XDR is something that either an analyst labels you or a customer says, but wait, isn't that XDR? It's not something we lead the conversation with.
Well, it's really easy to kind of get distracted by the label and miss, well, what's the value? What's the real
Exactly.
Extended detection response of what, how, where, what kind of situations across what environment. I mean, there's a lot of parameters to what that could mean to both you as a product company and the customer, of course.
Yeah, and so if we center the conversation on use cases, then we can find common ground if there is some, and everybody's having a productive conversation.
Interesting. What do you do you foresee your kind of relabeling yourself as an XDR company? Is that sort of where you're headed, or no, not really? Anomaly is really something else with that as a capability.
Right. Well, I would say before the term XDR came along, we were evangelizing techniques and use cases that didn't have a bucket that people recognized. And so for us, XDR is very fortuitous, because people immediately see, oh, there is a there that is now becoming sort of aspirational, and you're showing us the ability to deliver on that. So for now, XDR is a great bucket. So it's not like we tried to be XDR, it's just like XDR turned out to be a good fit for what we do. And maybe 2 years from now, it will be what we do will be a category of its own, but for now it fits very neatly into the XDR vision.
You've had some announcements during RSA. Maybe you've covered some of that already, but I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about what's happening with the company.
So a major release that we just launched a month ago is the cloud version of our Match product, which is the underpinning of our XDR offering. So with ThreatStream, Lens, and Match together, we have our Cloud XDR platform. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with people at RSA. There's quite good excitement around it. And I would say, our RSA has been gone for 2 years now. And so I think people are almost giddy just in general to be back in person.
There's a lot of that, for sure.
There is a very nice vibe going on. And we've been excited at the reaction and response to what we're talking about at our booth. We have a booth that's been busy. So,
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, we all invest in those things, hoping that they provide that kind of return, connecting with customers. Yeah, I also sense that there's a great interest in returning. We're in person and we're talking together without Zoom screens in between us.
That's right.
The other thing that some folks have mentioned to me, I'm curious too. I sense, in a community sense, people are talking about how do we work together to advance. We've got to up our game yet again, right? I mean, things have changed in the last 2.5 years. They always change, but maybe it's reached an accelerated pace of change, and sort of the same. What got you here isn't going to get you there. Sort of that idea. Do you sense that too?
Yeah, totally agree. And from our perspective, that's kind of what threat intelligence is all about, because it's like a neighborhood watch. So instead of just waiting for windows to break and the alarm to go off, you share information with each other in the community about what's happened to you, what you've seen, what did they go after, are they going after your vertical, your geography, and then people can collaborate, which is something that everybody says is a good idea, but in practice, a lot of people are either shy to share that kind of information because they're afraid of embarrassing themselves if there's some technical shortcoming in what they're sharing, or their own legal departments are worried that this could be seen as IP leakage between people in the same industry. So there's all kinds of cultural barriers to sharing. And we hope to be lowering the barriers with our sort of sharing focused enabling platform. So
great. Another theme, XDR being one of half a dozen. Another one is API security.
That's right.
And there's lots of various reasons for it. One of them being software's changed in API first, and how we're building applications, just the number of APIs. And
that's right.
It's as a threat attack vector, it's expanded significantly. How do you look at that part of the security threat vector landscape?
Yeah, in a way, I think it's another aspect of covering the attack surface. So in other words, APIs and automation in general is becoming more prevalent. So it's machines talking to machines. And in the same way, if you look at the stock market can be crashed right now without any humans being on the exchange, just the machines trading with each other. And
let's hope that's not happening right now, but yes.
Yes. And so API security in the cybersecurity space is very similar. As more and more of the activity is really automated, then that's where security is happening. And so I think it's a natural evolution, and it's really taking the same security techniques and applying them to more of the surface that's exposed.
I don't know if this analogy works, but it's almost like when we go to a completely interconnected, wired world with networks, and we're doing the same thing with APIs.
Right.
At a software level, essentially kind of building that same kind of fabric.
Yeah.
Well, great, Hugh. Thanks for stopping by. It's great to chat with you. What if folks want to go to anomaly.com, what kind of resources might be available to them there?
Anomaly.com is a great place to visit, and we are offering free trials, demonstrations, and also full-fledged trials of all the technology we've talked about. And we're very happy to not only that, but to help provide context to customers, visitors, on their security approach in general. So it's not just product pitch. We're very happy to discuss how threat intelligence can be useful wherever it comes from, and other techniques, use cases that are not obvious that our own customers have taught us.
Fantastic. Great. Well, check out anomaly.com. Thank you, Hugh. Great to see you in person as well.
Great.
Thanks.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Darren Williams, who's the CEO for Black Fog, and we're talking about ransomware. You guys just put together a report that suggests that there's more ransomware, and that may not be surprising, but it's also disappointing. So why don't we seem to be able to solve this issue? What's going on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. In fact, we're just about to publish next week, so I can give you a bit of a preview, but it looks like we're going to break all records in June, so which is phenomenal because 2022 has been amazing already, as you know, but we're in new territory at this point, I think, Mike, so it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. You'd never think it's going to keep breaking records, but it does. In terms of how did we get here, I think the strategy's always been, if you look back at version 1 products like antivirus software, when it was just a few hundred viruses that we had to protect against, it was relatively easy. We could fingerprint just like we fingerprint criminals these days when they come and break into your property. I think these version 1 tactics really don't work effectively against modern cybersecurity. Everyone has access to machine learning, artificial intelligence, and they basically train against antivirus software to begin with. So we know effectively that about 80% of all of these antivirus products don't really stop the modern ransomware. So then we fast forward to current generation products, version 2 products we like to call them. I think these were working fairly effectively effectively, a few years ago, but again, we've moved on. And so I think we're looking at a whole new category, version 3 products, which is, sort of where we apply emergent technology, where we're looking at different approaches and different tactics. So instead of looking at the cyber criminals coming at you all the time, which is what the traditional approach has been, when you consider things like firewalls and modern cybersecurity software, that's sort of their approach. We look at it differently. We just assume the bad guy's going to get into the building and grab your jewels, and we watch the back door instead. So we're watching for data leaving the devices. And when you actually start thinking about it, just by accident, we sort of stumbled upon this, that pretty much 99.9% of all cyber attacks, they have to get data back out, because let's think about it. An attack is all about getting data off the device. It's all about extorting you for money, effectively. And so if they can't get data out, they've got nothing to extort you with. There will be no data breach and no successful attack. So in essence, that's sort of how we got there, and what we're trying to do, something different and sort of a unique approach to the problem.
And those attacks are also how they double dip, right? First, they'll encrypt and get you to pay for that. Meanwhile, they take the data and then they'll say, but by the way, we're going to put it up on the dark web. So is it really worth engaging with these people to negotiate, or are you kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, no matter what?
I would say probably don't even bother, to be honest, because there's so many sophisticated business model these cyber criminals are using now. It used to be, we're back in a year ago, everything was being encrypted and bricking your computer. They've sort of moved away from that tactic now, and they sort of don't even bother encrypting. So they really just focus on the extortion capability and making financial gain. And some of these cyber criminal organizations are way more sophisticated than I think the media really give people credit for. They're run like small businesses, but they're global operations. They're multinational, with people in all sorts of places all over the world working together as teams and groups and resale channels and partnership programs. And so, I could start a business just attacking people just by going into the dark web, joining some of these groups and saying, hey, Mike, you've got the best technology for extorting people. Can I sort of use that software and that technology and then put my own spin on it, release it as, Vizard, ransomware, whatever, and then I will give you a percentage of the take that I make from it. So this is how sophisticated they're getting. It's really fascinating. We study this stuff every day. So we're always intrigued by the new business models. Even to the extent now we're starting to see new tactics where the gangs are saying, what are the other revenue channels I can actually use? Well, what about we provide pre-release information about who we're going to attack and provide that to maybe some financial guys, maybe on Wall Street, to maybe short some stocks. So I pay you for that information on who you're about to attack. I go short the stock, and then I basically wait for the attack to happen. So again, another great business model. So it's fascinating to me. I love watching what they're doing next.
It's hard to say whether that classifies as insider information or not, but
good question. Yeah, good point.
Do you think that the other part of this equation is, if I pay someone ransom, they just go tell the next guy, and now he knows that I'm willing to pay. So by the fact that I'm paying ransom, I just make myself a bigger target anyway.
That's one of my big things, right? So it's like we're all familiar with the problem. You charity giving and charitable donation giving, someone rings you, you give them money, and all of a sudden your phone never stops ringing because they start sharing it with all their buddies saying, hey, this guy's a payer. Let's ring him and get some money out of him. It's no different to ransomware. I think once you get on that list, it's not unusual that we typically see, and confidentially, we have clients that have been in this situation where they will be attacked 2, 3, 4 times because they've already paid up once. So it's a bit of a problem.
How do you think the relationship between cybersecurity teams and IT people has evolved as a result of this? I think we've been talking about trying to close the loop between data protection and security for decades. But do you think we're finally getting forced down that path? I mean, is there some goodness coming out of all this?
I think the goodness is the media attention that's paid to this area is good because it's making people aware that it's not a matter of, if you'll be attacked, but when you'll be attacked. I mean, you can see the increase in the amount of cyber insurance policies that have been taken out. But the problem with that approach is, while cybersecurity insurance, just like you take out building insurance for fire protection, you seem to do the same for cyber insurance. But the trouble is we're seeing the insurance carriers saying, these rates have got to go up because they're being paying out so much. They're saying, okay, now we need to start all over again and say, we will only protect you if you do X, Y, Z. And most of them are mandating some sort of cybersecurity tools that have been in place to help protect them. So, yes, I think it's good news that there's an awareness. I think we are getting more sophisticated in how we approach the problem. Governments are now being engaged in a much more serious way than they've ever been, providing notifications to small business, things to look out for and to be aware of. So it's still cat and mouse, though. As we get more sophisticated, I was talking to somebody the other day, and a lot of companies will say, yeah, but we've already got 2 or 3 tools. Why do we need your tool as well? Well, it's sort of like saying, why do we keep investing in new technology for warfare generally? If we were focused on if we thought muskets were the biggest, best tool that we ever had, we would never have invested in any more technologies. The problem is that the people that you're attacking also get more sophisticated. They learn how to actually combat your new tools, and then they come up with countermeasures. So then you've got to, it's one up, everyone's one up them. So that's why you have to keep investing in newer and better technology.
So are we ultimately engaged in some sort of permanent arms race then with these other folks who are the bad actors? They keep investing in automation and new platforms and new capabilities, and then we have to respond. And is that the cycle we're on forever?
Well, I don't know if it's forever, but excuse me, it's certainly a cycle that we're on right now. And I think there's things that we can do as a government generally that can help mitigate some of these responses too. There are, why is it, if we can stop the money flow, then it's going to be less of an issue for cybersecurity gangs, because if they can't get paid, what are they doing it for? So, where, like they do with drug trafficking, and they follow the money trail. It's very similar. So, cryptocurrency is a great topic at the moment, given the increase in awareness in the media and the advertising that we're seeing. But cryptocurrency is part of the problem too. So unless we can actually combat the money flow and anonymous payments to these, cyber gangs, I think it's going to be, like you say, constant arms race.
So you're suggesting that, beyond the technology, there's a whole financial aspect to this thing involving, Bitcoins and all this currency and how these people get paid. And if we can figure out some way to make it not possible for them to monetize this, is that where we're going? Is that the other half of this equation?
Yeah, I think so. If we really want to stop the constant arms race, I think that's the inevitable way that we're going to have to do it. But, it's difficult because cryptocurrency by design is a non-regulated environment and has no control by any centralized government, part of its blessing and curse. So, I think like any great technology, which it is a great technology, I think there's, people that will abuse it and people that will use it legitimately. But, is that because it's maturing now, it will mature to that level where it will be a viable alternative, and we can maybe mitigate some of the problems associated with some of the nefarious elements we're seeing there with, cyber gangs. It's interesting.
Do you think that maybe one day machine learning algorithms and AI in general will save us from ourselves here? Because it seems like we're just making it too easy right now.
Yeah, saving us from ourselves. I don't know. I mean, it's a great technology. I don't know that it's a panacea for everything. I mean, machine learning has its own problems. I mean, we're all familiar with some of the algorithms that have been developed. I don't know if you read about the one. I think it was a Stanford study, or there was some university that came out with some training algorithm based on machine learning, where they were actually detecting malignant melanomas versus non-malignant melanomas, and they trained it with millions of samples, and it worked 100% perfectly when they were training it. But when they put it into a real situation, it ended up working out that it was no better than guesswork in terms of detecting it. And when they went back over the raw data source and tried to understand why that would be, it turned out when they were actually taking the samples for the scans, the ones with malignant melanoma had a ruler next to them to measure it, and the other ones didn't. So actually what it was measuring was the presence or absence of a ruler. So these are the things we've got to be very careful when we use these technologies to understand their limitations as well. They can be used for good if they're used correctly.
So what's your best advice to folks? I mean, other than visiting your website, obviously, but what is it you wish more folks would do to kind of combat this threat or be smarter about it? What's the thing that we're missing?
I think we're always missing the stuff we can't see. And the focus we have is obviously on data leaking. Everyone knows what data they're consuming when they go to a website. You go to CNN.com, you pull down a website. What people don't see is what's going back the other way. So when you pull down that website, it's instrumenting the entire page with lots of little widgets all over it. And then those widgets actually have callbacks. So you not only get to the news, but you're getting all this other code, which often injects payloads onto the device, and then they call back. And, one of the widgets might be your political affiliation. One might be male or female. One might be, any other particular things you've been shopping for over the internet. We've all experienced that. So they all collect individual pieces of information. Not one of them actually has enough data to actually breach any regulation, but what they do is they all send the data to the cloud, and then they all share it up there, and then they consolidate that information back into one profile on you, and then they sell that information. So I think the problem is that we never see the data going back the other way, so we ignore it. Everyone watches it coming at you, not leaving you. So that's what I would say for people to be quite conscious of. When they're consuming stuff, it's more than you think there is happening.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. There's a lot you can do on your own to protect your environments, but one thing for sure, the bad guys aren't going away anytime soon. Darian, thanks for being on the show.
No problems. Pleasure. Thanks very much, Mike. Bye.
All right, back to you guys in the studio. All right. Hope you enjoyed today's TechstrongTV. We will be back next Monday with fresh new content. Tomorrow is a best of repeat. Congrats to Natan on doing his first news segment today. Until then, guys, have a great, safe weekend. Hey, COVID's still out there. The numbers are up, so do be careful. Be safe. Be well. Be strong. Tech Strong. Bye-bye.